Chapter 1159. Congratulations to the host for completing the sales task. You've taken a firm step toward your goal of becoming the god of cooking. Task reward. Mental energy control technique, a fragment of the god of cooking set. The system's serious voice echoed in Bu Feng's head. The task reward was also announced. Bu Feng opened his eyes, but he wasn't surprised or shaken. Perhaps he had already confirmed that it was time to complete the sales task. If the Heaven Chief restaurant in the Heaven Chief world hadn't opened due to the decline of the Heaven Tree, Bu Feng would have completed the sales task a long time ago. However, since he had opened the Fong Fong ice cream shop in Goddess City, it was reasonable that he could complete the sales task. After all, the sales of the Fong Fong ice cream shop were really good. The temptation of ice cream to women was much greater than that of ordinary delicacies. Bu Feng sat cross-legged not far from the spring of life. He opened his eyes, exhaling gently. Murky air seemed to spurt out from his mouth. As he had completed the sales task, Bu Feng's cultivation base had also advanced. His mind sank into his body, looking at the system panel. Host, Bu Feng True Energy Cultivation Base. 9-star True Immortal Realm Cooking Talent. 8-star Skills. Level 2 Meteor Knife Technique, 100 out of 100. Level 2 Big Dipper Carving Technique, 100 out of 100. Level 1 Knife Technique. Overlord 13 Blades, 13 out of 13. Gourmet Array, 4 out of 6. Cutting Immortal Style, 1/3. Tools, Golden Dragon Bone Kitchen Knife. God of Cooking Set. Black Turtle Constellation Wok, God of Cooking Set. Vermilion Chef Robe, God of Cooking Set. White Tiger Heaven Stove, God of Cooking Set. God of Cooking Overall Rating. Immortal Chef, able to refine the original energy in the ingredients and condense immortal energy. Cooking skills have reached a higher level. System level. Level 4. Able to fuse immortal energy. True energy conversion rate increased to 200%. System reward. Mental energy control technique. A fragment of the god of cooking set. Bu Feng looked at the system panel. Shortly after, his mind returned from the panel. He didn't pay too much attention to this. His cultivation had risen to the 9-star True Immortal Realm. This was not out of Bu Feng's expectations. The system's breakthroughs had always been like this. A huge leap could save a lot of time and effort. Some people might not be able to reach this level in their entire lives, but Bu Feng could reach it in a single breath's time, as long as he completed the required sales. Of course, the later it was, the harder it was to complete the sales. Naturally, it would not be easy to break through. Bu Feng could feel the terrifying power contained within his body. This power had suddenly skyrocketed and was much stronger than before. If he, who was at the 3-star True Immortal Realm, were to face the current him, he would be instantly killed. Bu Feng could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. It turned out that the cultivation of a 9-star True Immortal Realm expert was actually this strong. If he had not created the explosive meatball, he might not have been able to kill so many 9-star real Immortal Realm experts. There had to be some element of luck involved. Bu Feng exhaled, coming back to his senses after his cultivation had skyrocketed. The reward for this advancement was a little strange. It was not a dish. Instead, it was some kind of mental energy manipulation technique. Why was the reward this time? Bu Feng's mind flickered. Instantly, the system's reward turned into a stream of light and instantly flowed into Bu Feng's brain. But as Bu Feng sat cross-legged on the big rock again, closing his eyes, a mysterious wave of energy covered his body. It was as though there was a waterfall washing his body. What's this? Bu Feng's mind entered his spirit sea. In the sky above his spirit sea, a canopy appeared. As the canopy swept across, it seemed as though there were lines of scriptures appearing on the canopy. Those should be the mental energy manipulation technique. The further he advanced, the more generous the system's reward would be. Hence, Bu Feng believed that this mental energy manipulation technique would not be of little value. After cultivating for a while, Bu Feng opened his eyes. The mental energy manipulation technique was a technique that could strengthen Bu Feng's mental energy manipulation. In the past, Bu Feng also knew how to release his mental energy and even use it to cook. However, that kind of manipulation was too rough, and his perception was very weak. This technique could make Bufang's mental energy more condensed. It could even be used to fight against enemies, which would be of great help to his cooking skills. The mental energy manipulation technique was divided into 3 levels. They were divine perception, divine will, and divine consciousness. Bufang's mental energy was strong, but it was not condensed. According to the mental energy manipulation technique, it could not even be considered as divine perception. Bufang sat cross-legged, comprehending the golden scriptures that kept floating above his spirit sea. Those scriptures continuously appeared, like resplendent stars, illuminating everything. As the light sprinkled down, it was as though Bufang's spirit sea was covered with a layer of golden gauze. The 4 tool spirits of the god of cooking sat around the spirit sea, bathing in the golden light and looking very quiet. In the distance, there was a mass of chaos churning. It was the unknown part of Bufang's spirit sea. Apparently, Bufang's spirit sea had not been fully developed. The scriptures kept falling, emitting mysterious fluctuations, which made Bufang's whole body shine with golden light. All of a sudden, Bufang's mental energy suddenly condensed. He felt as though something had rushed out of its shackles above his head. Even if he closed his eyes, he could see everything around him. Even the ants on the ground would be able to see it clearly. Bufang opened his eyes. His gaze was as sharp as a sword, bursting out a terrible aura. Bufang felt as though he had gone through a baptism. Lying on the ground, Lord Go suddenly opened his sleepy eyes and looked in Bufang's direction. He happened to see Bufang open his eyes. The bright light bursting out of Bufang's eyes surprised Lord Go. This boy has become stronger again. He did not conceal his 9-star, true immortal realm aura, so Lord Go could clearly sense it. In the distance, Ice Saint, who was sitting cross-legged on a blue stone, was slightly taken aback. She looked at Bufang with some nostalgia. In her arms, Little Who seemed to have clearly sensed Bufang's aura. With a squeak, he broke free from Ice Saint's arms, turned into a Baiguang, and dashed out in a flash. He came to Bufang's shoulder and rubbed Bufang with his tail. The corners of Bufang's mouth twitched. He raised his hand and rubbed Little Who's head. As he stood up, the bones all over his body emitted a thunderous rumble. His cultivation base had once again improved greatly. Lord Go rolled his eyes. Bufang had made such a big noise when he broke through and disturbed Lord Go's sleep. The 9-tailed fox's dark golden eyes stared at Bufang. She was shocked and couldn't help but click her tongue. He was indeed a big shot. He had reached 9-star, true immortal realm in just one breath. If this kind of existence wasn't a big shot, what was he? Ice Saint calmly looked at Bufang. Seeing Bufang walk toward her, her eyes were a little dazed. She seemed to see a person from 10,000 years ago walking out of the passage of time, smiling and leaning toward her. However, it was just her illusion. In the blink of an eye, the familiar person had disappeared. What appeared in front of her was Bufang's emotionless face. You look so similar to him. His breakthrough is exactly the same as yours, Ice Saint said with nostalgia. Bufang nodded indifferently. He was already used to such things. Perhaps the person Ice Saint was talking about was the previous host of the system. But so what? He, Bufang, was Bufang. You came to God Vanishing Mountain for the spring of life, right? Ice Saint sat leisurely on a blue stone and looked at Bufang with her pretty eyes. Bufang nodded. The heaven tree in the heaven chief realm is declining. We need the spring of life to revive the heaven tree seed. I need the spring of life, Bufang said. After Bufang said that, he opened his hand, and a dull seed appeared in his palm. Ice Saint glanced at the seed, her brows slightly arching. A Saint-grade immortal ingredient. No wonder it needs the spring of life. No, the normal spring of life can't save it. We need the water from the source of the spring of life. Ice Saint's vision was extraordinary. She could see the problem at first glance. Bufang was silent. It was just as Ice Saint had said. That's the source of the spring of life. If you can take the water from there, I'll give it to you. Ice Saint pointed at the vortex in the distance. Bufong froze. He didn't expect Ice Saint to be so easy to talk to. The spring of life was brought here by that person. If you can take it, it's your chance. But I have to warn you, the source of the spring of life contains endless dangers. You have to be careful, Ice Saint said. If you die in the source of the spring of life, I won't save you. Ice Saint's cold words made Bufong's eyes narrow. In the distance, Lord Go also opened his eyes, looking over curiously. Obviously, he had also seen how terrifying the source of the spring of life was. Bufong squeezed the heaven tree seed in his hand. He exhaled softly and put Little Who down. He put Foxy down from his shoulder, and Ice Saint took her. Then, with a thought in his mind, he turned around. He took a step forward, and his figure instantly drifted toward the source of the spring of life. Ice Saint, Lord Go, the nine-tailed fox, and Little Who all rested their eyes on Bufong. The danger of the spring of life was not to be trifled with. As he walked in the air, Bufong got closer and closer. Soon, he was in the middle of the huge whirlpool. The whirlpool was constantly spewing out rich life energy. Bufong landed beside the whirlpool. Looking at it, which looked like a bottomless pit, he took a deep breath. This should be the source of the spring of life. Bufong furrowed his brows. The life energy was so strong that it seemed to be filled with the will of death. Watching the life energy in the whirlpool turn into a strangling force, Bufong finally understood what Ice Saint meant by danger. Bufong took out a blue and white porcelain bowl. As soon as he released his divine perception, it was as if an invisible hand had grabbed the bowl and scooped up the water in the whirlpool, trying to scoop out the water from the source. However, as soon as it entered the whirlpool, the frightening power struck, instantly shattering the blue and white porcelain bowl, turning it into powder. Bufong couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air when he saw that destructive power. How could the water from the source be so terrifying? It would be difficult to scoop out the water with ordinary means. In the distance, the nine-tailed fox was a little playful. He had his reasons for daring to save his wife. The source of the spring of life was full of danger. Even if he didn't guard it, not many people could take out the water. It would be difficult for this little fellow to do it. Suddenly, the nine-tailed fox's eyes froze. That was because Bufong, who was standing outside the source, suddenly took a step forward. His entire body fell straight down towards the source of the energy. In just a flash, he fell into the whirlpool. The nine-tailed fox sucked in a breath of cold air. Is that human boy courting death? Even the little saint would be seriously injured if he fell into the source of the spring of life. How dare he go in? He's dead for sure. Ice Saint and Lord Go's eyes flashed, a playful look in their eyes. In the Heaven Chief realm, on the side of the Heaven Nether Bridge, the towering Nether Prison City wall, the silent bronze gate stood majestically. Suddenly, a loud noise burst out from the bronze gate. It caused the entire city wall to tremble violently. On the city wall, rubble rustled and rolled down. Open! A roar that sounded like that of a demon resounded. The bronze gate made a heavy creaking sound, and the sound of it sliding across the ground seemed to shake the whole Heaven Chief realm. Rumble! The bronze gate slowly opened, and terrible nether energy kept spreading out from it. A cyan palm with exposed bones slammed against the bronze gate. The next moment it exerted force. The bronze gate was pushed open with a loud bang. With a loud bang, the bronze gate swung open, smashed into the city wall, and sank deep into it. A huge figure slowly walked out of the deep city gate. Every step he took caused the ground to shake violently. Rip, rip. The sound of something piercing through the air rang out. One after another, Nether Prison experts clad in black robes flew out of it. Boom! The behemoth stepped down, sinking the ground. A terrible aura swept out like a storm. The seal is finally broken. It's time for the greenhouse flowers of the Heaven Chief realm to feel the fear of the Nether Prison. Chapter 1160. Heaven Chief Realm First Layer. Heaven Chief Restaurant Realm Lord Dit, who was resting with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes. A hint of gloominess flashed across his eyes. Was it too late? The heaven tree hadn't recovered, and Bufong hadn't returned with the spring of life. The seal that bound the Heaven Chief realm to the Nether Prison had been broken. The Nether Prison experts had already launched a large-scale invasion. Slowly walking out of the Heaven Chief restaurant, he stood at the entrance and raised his head to look at the sky. There were no longer any green leaves on the withered heaven tree. The once luxuriant heaven tree had now completely withered. All the immortal fruits had disappeared, leaving only withered yellow leaves drifting on the tree, as though they would fall with a gust of wind. The entire Heaven Chief realm was filled with despair. Realm Lord Dit raised his hand, his slender hand piercing through the air. His face became very bitter, and there seemed to be pitch-black nether energy swirling in the air. This was the nether energy that belonged to the Nether Prison, and it stung his skin. The Nether Prison's army has come. Realm Lord Dit muttered. The end of the Heaven Chief realm has come. He took a step forward. Realm Lord Dit's figure instantly soared into the sky, turning into a stream of light as he sped up. In the fourth layer of the Heaven Chief realm, City Lord Mengqi stood on a tall building in a white robe. The dry wind blew, causing her clothes to sway. Her beautiful eyes constantly trembled as she looked at the sky, at the darkness that was constantly spreading. A terrifying sense of danger that made even her soul tremble constantly spread out. She knew that those Nether Prison experts had already begun to cross the Heaven Nether Bridge. She didn't know when Zhou Lords had also appeared, his face extremely pale. Little Chef Bufong hasn't returned yet. Zhou Lord's eyes were filled with despair. The darkness in the sky kept spreading. Without the protection of the Heaven Tree, the Heaven Chief realm was like a piece of loose sand, unable to resist the invasion of the Nether Prison experts. No, the spring of life has not been retrieved, and the Heaven Tree has not recovered at all. Without the protection of the Heaven Tree, we can only become ghosts under the Nether Prison's cavalry. Mengqi murmured. Suddenly, Mengqi and Zhou Lords narrowed their eyes. This was because they saw a beam of light shooting into the sky, heading towards the 5th floor of Heaven Chief Realm. It's the Realm Lord. Zhou Lords had a complicated look in their eyes. Realm Lord Dit was going to stop the Nether Prison army to buy time for Bufong. Let's go as well. We can't let the Realm Lord bear everything alone, City Lord Mengqi said softly. However, her words were rejected by Zhou Lords. No, Mengqi, you stay here. You need to calm the panicking people. I'll go with the Realm Lord to fight against the Nether Prison army, Zhou Lords said to Mengqi. Mengqi paused. You're more suitable than me to calm everyone down. Zhou Lords gave Mengqi a deep look. Mengqi fell silent. Zhou Lords didn't wait for Mengqi to say anything. He burst into laughter, pinched his fingers together, and soared into the sky with a big dipper step. Mengqi took a deep breath, turned, and left. She had to calm everyone down to prevent panic from spreading. Once everyone was overwhelmed by fear, the Heaven Chief realm would have no hope. Realm Lord Dit's golden hair fluttered in the wind. Suddenly, he froze. He turned his head to look. Immediately, he saw City Lord Zhou's figure walking in the air. What are you doing here? Realm Lord Dit furrowed his brows in confusion. To fight shoulder to shoulder with the City Lord, Mengqi needs to calm people down. You and I must fight the enemy, Zhou Lord said. Of course, if he didn't pinch his fingers together, he would look very manly. The corner of Realm Lord Dit's mouth twitched. Good, then you and I will go kill the enemy. No matter how strong the enemy is, we have to fight our way out. We have to stall for time. I believe Bufong Little Chef will be back soon with the spring of life, Realm Lord Dit said. Zhou Lord's eyes focused, but he didn't say anything. Then, the two of them turned into streams of light, shooting toward the 5th layer. Boom! The cloud shattered. The two of them landed on the 5th floor of Heaven Chief Realm. Their feet stepped on the ground. The two of them raised their heads, looking into the distance. A moment later, the two of them froze on the spot, gawking and dropping their jaws as they looked around. A gust of cold air instantly shrouded them. Many pairs of eyes suddenly locked on them. The air seemed to have stagnated. The fifth floor of Heaven Chief, realm dark, nether energy blotted out the sky. They were surrounded by nether prison experts in black robes. They had discovered realm Lord D-Tai and city Lord Zo, who had rushed out of the clouds. Then everyone fixed their gazes on the two of them with a playful gaze. Boom! Boom! The ground trembled. A moment later, the dark crowd parted to make a path. A gigantic giant walked out from behind. His terrifying aura almost crushed the void. This was a giant that was dozens of feet tall. His entire body was greenish-black, and his body was covered with terrifying muscles. His skin was green, and his eyes were scarlet. He had an ugly head that made people's hearts tremble like a demon. One of the giant's arms was a bloody mess, and his bones could be seen. Roar! He seemed to see Realm Lord did and Zo Lords. The giant let out an angry roar, and a terrifying pressure suddenly spread out. Unforgivable bunch of fellows. Who blew up my arm? Come out. Let him come out. I want to tear him into pieces. The giant roared incomparably. Pitch-black nether energy suppressed the void. This was a little saint. From the aura his body emitted, there was no doubt that he was a little saint expert. As for which revolution he was a little saint, it no longer meant anything. Because the strongest realm lord in the Heaven Chief realm only had a half-step saint realm cultivation base. A little saint was enough to completely crush him. God vanishing mountain below the seven-colored pool. Dense life energy filled the air. The waterfall poured down, smashing into the misty pool, causing a wave of ripples. Beside the pool, a giant fox stood, its 9 tails swaying in the void. A beautiful woman wearing a long white robe stood on a blue stone, hugging a little hoof fox. Not far from the beautiful woman, there was a fat black dog lying on the ground. It was also looking at the pond curiously. Rumble, rumble, rumble. In the pool, there was a whirlpool spinning. The life energy in the whirlpool quickly swept out, turning into a terrifying, strangling power. The 9-tailed fox was incomparably shocked. The human really jumped down like that? He's just sending himself to death. The strangling force in the whirlpool of the source of the spring of life was extremely terrifying. Even a little saint would be tortured to death by it. The human actually jumped down in one go. After breaking through, did he become stupid? Bufong had indeed jumped straight into the whirlpool at the source of the spring of life. Of course, he relied on the invincibility of the vermilion robe. The invincibility of the vermilion robe gave him the courage to fight. The terrifying life energy turned into a strangling power. This was the so-called extreme of life, which was death. The vermilion robe turned scarlet, and the strands of strangling power hit Bufong's body, causing sparks to fly. Bufong's mental energy was highly concentrated. The divine perception that he had just condensed was controlled to the extreme, sensing every little thing around him. He did not dare to be careless. Finally, soon, Bufong reached the bottom. With a splash, he fell into the water. The water in this pool was actually the spring of life. It was incomparably sweet, containing endless life energy. However, this was not what Bufong wanted. He spat out a bubble. Both of his hands moved forward, his legs moving up and down. Like a fish, he turned into an arrow, continuing to dash towards the bottom of the water. After a long time, Bufong reached the bottom. It was a loud bang. Bufong felt as though he had passed through an invisible barrier. Instantly, the spring of life that filled his body disappeared. Bufong landed on the ground with a thud, rolled on the ground, and stood up. True energy circulated, evaporating all the water on his body. The entire space was filled with the fragrance of the evaporating spring of life. This should be the source of the spring of life. Bufong was surprised. He did not expect that there was another world under the water. This place seemed to be a world of its own. The so-called spring of life should be here. Bufong did not say anything. In his spirit sea, golden scriptures flashed. Bufong's invisible mental energy spread out like many tentacles, taking in everything in the entire area. Huh. All of a sudden, Bufong's eyes shrank. He looked in a direction. Striding forward, he soon arrived at the place he had sensed. It was a stone room. The stone room was filled with crystal-like crystals. There seemed to be liquid flowing in these crystals. What is this? Bufong narrowed his eyes, his face puzzled. This is a life crystal fruit, a product of the source of the spring of life. It's a spirit fruit that has gathered countless vitality. It melts in water and evaporates in fire. It's a precious food ingredient, a pseudo-saint-grade immortal material. The system's serious voice rang in Bufong's mind, explaining to Bufong. Bufong was taken aback. There was actually such a mystical spirit fruit. These crystals were actually spirit fruits. Bufong reached out, grabbing a crystal. With a thought, he opened his mouth and spat out a ball of white flame. The moment the flame came into contact with the crystal directly vaporized and disappeared without a trace. Only a thick fragrance lingered in the air. It looked like a good thing. Although it was not a saint-grade immortal material, a pseudo-saint-grade immortal material was not bad either. Bufong's divine perception moved, instantly wrapping up these life crystal fruits. Then, he threw them into the heaven and earth farmland. After storing the crystal fruits properly, Bufong's eyes lit up. Only then did Bufong realize that there was a whole new world inside. Under the wrapping of the life crystal fruits was a bronze bowl. Inside the bronze bowl was a ball of silver liquid. That silver liquid seemed to be wriggling, giving people a strange feeling. Squinting at that liquid, the moment Bufong's mental force came into contact with the silver liquid, it was mercilessly devoured by it. Bufong was startled. Swish! All of a sudden, two little silver dragons crawled out of the bronze bowl. Their claws rested on the edge of the bowl, staring at Bufong. When Bufong's gaze landed on him, his eyes widened. The two little dragons turned back into silver liquid, merging into the bronze bowl. Is this the source of the spring of life? Bufong looked at the two little silver dragons that were condensing from time to time with a curious look on his face. The two little dragons were quite cute, swimming around in the bronze bowl as if they were playing. Bufong walked to the side of the bronze bowl. He didn't say anything, reaching out his hand to pick up the bowl. However, as soon as he picked it up, he found that the bronze bowl was so heavy that he couldn't lift it. The source of these two springs of life should have been sealed here by someone. Bufong frowned, carefully studying the bronze bowl. The person who had set up the seal clearly felt that no one would be able to break it. He was very confident. Bufong carefully studied the bronze bowl. Suddenly, his eyes shrank. He sucked in a breath of cold air, his face a little strange. He sat cross-legged in front of the bronze bowl. The two little silver dragons were also lying on the edge of the bowl, curiously looking at Bufong. Bufong closed his eyes. His divine perception emerged as he raised his hand. Mental energy continuously gathered in his hand. Very quickly, an array appeared within it. Bufong took out a crystal fruit of life. Then, he sent the formation into the crystal fruit. Bufong threw the crystal fruit into the bronze bowl. A moment later, the entire bowl seemed to be boiling. Sure enough, the bottom of this bronze bowl has the gourmet formation, imprisoned. Bufong thought to himself. The crystal fruit of life had a formation carved on it. As soon as he threw it into the bowl, the formation on the bronze bowl was instantly destroyed. Bufong reached out his hand, picking up the bronze bowl. As he reached out, the two little dragons crawled into his palm. As the two little dragons crawled out, the liquid in the bowl disappeared. It turned out that the gourmet formation, imprisoned, had such an effect. These two little silver dragons were the source of the springs of life. Bufong stared at the two little dragons lying on his palms, and the corners of his mouth suddenly rose into a smile. Bufong took out the seed of the heaven tree, the seed that belonged to him. He gave it to the little dragon. The little silver dragon seemed to have found a new toy, holding the seed of the heaven tree and playing with it happily. Silver energy seeped into the seed through the surface of the seed of the heaven tree. After absorbing the silver energy, the seed, which had been dim for a long time, finally changed. Chapter 1161. The silver life energy seeped into the seed, causing the surface of the heaven tree seed to crack. There are many fine cracks on the surface of the sword. Bufong's eyes narrowed, and he looked at it carefully. Instantly, he found that the heaven tree seed had shed a layer of dead skin. Under the dead skin was the golden seed, overflowing with light and spirit energy. Under the nourishment of the little silver dragon, the dead seed was revived. The little silver dragon was also bewildered, lying on Bufong's palm, curiously looking at the revived heaven tree seed. It seemed to be wondering why the seed had changed. Bufong didn't move, looking at the seed carefully. In his eyes, the layer of dead skin gradually peeled off. Eventually, the entire seed seemed to turn into gold, dazzling and eye-catching. Thick life energy emitted from the seed. The corners of Bufong's mouth twitched. He was very satisfied. The source of the spring of life was indeed magical. With just a little nourishment, the spirit energy in the seed had become even thicker. It seemed to be even thicker than before it had withered. There were two little silver dragons on Bufong's palm. One of them was still hugging the seed, while the other looked at Bufong. In the next moment, it turned into a silver thread and shot out, diving into the pool outside the cave. Boom! As soon as the little silver dragon entered the water, it swelled up in the wind. In the end, it turned into a giant divine dragon, twisting, swaying in the pool before disappearing. Bufong was bewildered. Then he turned his head and saw the other little silver dragon holding the heaven tree seed, not letting go. Bufong was also happy. Pursing his lips, his mind flickered. A moment later, he brought the heaven tree seed and the little silver dragon to the heaven and earth farmland. Swoosh! The wind blew, making the vermilion robe flap. Bufong landed on the grass. The air in the heaven and earth farmland was very fresh, and it also carried the rich fragrance of various spirit fruits. As soon as the little silver dragon entered the space of the heaven tree, it straightened its body and sniffed as if it was observing its surroundings. The next moment, it cheered excitedly in Bufong's hands. Of course, it was still holding the seed of the heaven tree. Bufong arrived in front of the wooden hut. In the distance, Niohan-san and Jing Yuan were talking and laughing as they walked over. When Jing Yuan saw Bufong, she was very excited. However, she was carrying a basin of milk in her hand, so she didn't move much. "Are you here for milk?" Bufong glanced at Jing Yuan and said. Jing Yuan nodded excitedly. "Head Chef Bu, our Fong Fong ice cream shop's business is booming," Jing Yuan said excitedly. "In just 4 days, our Fong Fong ice cream shop sales have reached the same level as Spring Breeze Pavilion's monthly sales. And this is because our dishes are priced lower." Bufong naturally knew that the sales had skyrocketed. Otherwise, he wouldn't have broken through so quickly. After praising Jing Yuan, he asked Jing Yuan to go back first. Bufong didn't talk much. He had some business to do in the heaven and earth farmland. Jing Yuan nodded, leaving the farmland with an excited heart. As for Bufong, he went to find Niohan-san. Niohan-san saw the little silver dragon and the dazzling golden seed of the heaven tree in Bufong's hands. What a rich aura of life. Niohan-san sucked in a breath of cold air. This is the source of the spring of life. If we put it in the river, it should increase the farmland vitality a lot. In the future, you should open up more river basins so that this little fellow has more space to wander. Bufong looked at Niohan-san, instructing him. Then, he brought Niohan-san to the riverbank. As if sensing the aura of the water source, the little silver dragon turned its head to look. Seeing the clear river water, the little silver dragon showed a trace of disdain. Compared to the spring of life, this river water was trash. Bufong grinned. This little fellow can be so tsundere. He flicked his finger on the little silver dragon's head. The little fellow instantly rolled away, falling into the river with a splash. Roar! A moment later, a dragon roar reverberated. A huge silver dragon suddenly emerged from the river, surging in the river. At the same time, the river water changed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Waves of invisible life energy diffused, seeping into the river water. Swish! In the river, the blood lobsters jumped up, waving their claws. Brother Octopus also waved his octopus claws, looking a little excited. In short, as the source of the spring of life entered the farmland, the entire river had an earth-shaking change. From now on, we will call this river the River of Life, Bufong said. Neo Hansen gawked, dropping his jaw. He didn't expect that the little silver dragon could be so awesome. Where did Owner Bu swindle such an awesome thing from? The river's evolution would soon show its effect. The entire heaven and earth farmland would be sublimated. The quality of the spirit fruits would increase, and the immortal herbs and immortal ingredients would be upgraded. To the heaven and earth farmland, it would be a qualitative leap. More importantly, it would strengthen the farmland's Great Path's power, promoting the complete formation of the farmland's Great Path's will. All right, that's not the main point. This seed can be planted, right? Bufong looked at Neo Hansan, handing him the Heaven Tree seed. The bright gold Heaven Tree seed was full of vitality. Neo Hansan took it, his hand shaking. This seed, the energy it contained was too terrifying. What level of seed was this? Whether it was this seed or the silver dragon's source, they were things beyond his imagination. Try to plant one. Plant it right in the middle of the farmland. Bufong thought for a while, then said. Neo Hansan excitedly took the seed and dashed away. He couldn't wait anymore. The center of the farmland was a few hundred meters in front of the wooden hut. That spot was originally meant to plant a precious immortal ingredient. However, with the Heaven Tree seed, that immortal ingredient had to give way. Neo Hansen took out a hoe, skillfully digging a hole. This pit was dug very deep. He carefully placed the dazzling golden seed of the immortal tree into the pit that he had dug. Neo Hansen covered it with soil. Bufong's heart focused. His divine sense spread out, and the entire farmland seemed to be under his perception. Neo Hansan shivered. Owner Bu's cultivation base seemed to be stronger. Swish! A long silver dragon soared up into the sky from the river, causing the water to explode. The silver dragon eagerly flew toward Bufong. A moment later, it turned into a little silver dragon, lying in Bufong's hand. Bufong asked the little silver dragon to spit out the water of life, which sprinkled on the hole he had dug. Immediately, a strange fluctuation spread out from the hole. Buzz, a wave of vitality filled the air. Bufong and Neo Hansan watched curiously. All of a sudden, Bufong's eyes shrank. The soil cracked open, and a hint of green struggled free from it. Then, the greenery gradually deepened, and the speed of its growth became faster and faster. Soon, it turned into a big tree. It was a tree that was more than 3 meters tall. The leaves were green, and the spirit energy was dense. The swaying branches and leaves were constantly emitting dense spiritual energy. This spirit energy kept rising, and soon it completely filled the entire farmland. Neo Hansan was overjoyed. With this heaven tree and the spring of life, the farmland's level would rise again. Whether it was the heaven tree or the spring of life, they were both sacred-grade immortal materials, holy treasures that could support a part of the world. They were treasures that even the existence of the great sage wanted. However, there were 2 of them in the farmland. The heaven tree seed could germinate. Bufong was delighted. Even the heaven tree seed in his hand, which was the most difficult to revive, had revived. Then wouldn't the 2 seeds in Realm Lord Dit's hands be easier to revive? Bufong understood that his task this time should be completed. No, Bufong's heart suddenly tightened. He remembered a serious matter. It seemed that he had spent a lot of time searching for the spring of life, and it took a long time to break through in the God-vanishing mountain from start to finish. It had taken him about half a month. Had Nether Prison attacked the Heaven Chief realm? Thinking of this, Bufong's heart instantly tightened. Without the slightest hesitation, after informing the ecstatic Neo Hansan, Bufong left the farmland, returning to that cave. Walking out of the cave, he dove into the spring of life. Swish, a silver dragon flew over, carrying Bufong. In just a blink of an eye, it soared. Above his head, there was a constantly spinning vortex. The terrifying life force, strangling power, made people's hearts cold. However, with the silver dragon, the pure source of the spring of life, the strangling power of a life energy was naturally useless. There was a loud bang. The spring of life exploded. A silver dragon coiled in the air. Above its head, Bufong sat upright. In the cave, the nine-tailed fox stared at Bufong. Ice Saint also watched in surprise. He's unscathed. The nine-tailed fox was shocked. He was unscathed after entering the spring of life's vortex. This human boy was indeed a big shot. Bufong landed on the ground. The silver dragon plunged back into the spring of life. Is this the real source of the spring of life? Ice Saint asked. Her voice was very gentle. Little Hu broke free from Ice Saint's arms, turned into Bai Guang, and climbed onto Bufong's shoulder, lying comfortably. Xiaopi was on the other side, staring at Little Hu with its compound eyes. The bound spring of life has now been released. He is free, Bufong said. Ice Saint's eyes were a little complicated. However, Bufong didn't say much. He turned his eyes to Lord Go and said, Lord Go, has Nether Prison begun to attack the Heaven Chief Realm? We have to go back to the Heaven Chief Realm as soon as possible. Lord Go yawned and glanced at Bufong. What's the hurry? But according to the defensive power of that array, the defense of the Heaven Chief Realm should have been broken by now. Lord Go said, Then I have to go back to the Heaven Chief Realm as soon as possible. Bufong was silent for a while, then decided to leave. He had finished what he needed to do in God Vanishing Mountain. If he didn't go back now, the Heaven Chief Realm was likely to be destroyed. The Heaven Chief Realm was a heaven that belonged to chefs. Bufong didn't want a chef's heaven to disappear like this. Ice Saint knew that Bufong was going to leave, so she didn't plan to keep Bufong. She just nodded, indicating that she was bidding farewell. Be careful of the calamity I'm warning you about. Ice Saint stared at Bufong, saying. After saying that, Bufong's figure paused. Then, Bufong shot out of the cave, standing outside the peak of God Vanishing Mountain as he sped down. Rumble. Nine-tailed fox jumped out of the cave. Looking at Bufong, she was a little flustered and exasperated. Human, get my daughter back. Nine-tailed fox was dumbfounded. Let Little Hu Li follow. Following that little guy might be Little Hu Li's lucky chance. Besides, Little Hu Li has grown up, so he has to go out for a walk. An icicle spread under Ice Saint's feet as she appeared at Nine-tailed Fox's side. That's true, but Little Hu Li is too young, isn't she? Nine-tailed Fox was still a little reluctant. Although it was said that children had to leave their parents when they grew up, however, Little Hu Li hadn't even grown a second tail. She was really still a child. Realm Lord Dit's pupils constricted. The Nether Prison army around him brought him terrible pressure. Even though he was a half-step saint, he could feel the fear spreading through his body. The huge demon with a green face and fangs in front of him was even more terrifying. However, from what this giant demon said, it seemed that he wanted to settle the score with the person who injured his hand. In this regard, Realm Lord Dit couldn't help but think of Bufong. After Bufong threw the perishing pot into the Bronze Gate, the Saint Realm expert who was injured by the explosion should be this giant demon in front of him. You don't want to talk? Then I'll destroy the Heaven Chief Realm. Let's see if he can still talk then. The giant demon roared, smashing his green arm on the ground. Without the support of the Heaven Tree, the 5th floor of Heaven Chief Realm exploded with a loud boom. The entire ground of the 5th floor was completely shattered and destroyed. The buildings of the 5th floor were shaken and collapsed, turning into ruins. Waves of air rolled out, and the 5th floor of the Heaven Chief Realm pressed down on the 4th floor. The Heaven Tree was withered, and it no longer had any power to support the 5th floor. The giant demon gave an order. The surrounding Nether Prison experts also moved. The number of Nether Prison experts was just too great. There were too many of them. Even the weakest had reached the 1-star True Immortal Realm. Although 1-star True Immortal Realm experts were like ants to Realm Lord Dit, they couldn't handle so many people. Zo Lord's legs had long turned soft, and he couldn't even hold his thumb and middle finger. With so many people rushing over, his heart was filled with fear, and despair shrouded everything. Realm Lord Dit put on the golden armor, and his aura suddenly rose. He forced the nether prison experts to retreat. His mind flickered. 7 golden, steaming explosive meatballs floated around his body at once. This was something he had asked Bufong for. He had seen the power of the perishing pot, but Bufong didn't give it to him, only giving him these things. Realm Lord Dit believed that the explosive meatballs wouldn't be weak. He didn't expect that the explosive meatballs would be used so soon. He hoped that these explosive meatballs wouldn't disappoint him and could buy him some time. He followed Bufong's instructions. Realm Lord Dit picked up an explosive meatball. He took a bite. Instantly, a sizzling sound rang out, and a thick fragrance filled the air. His mind flickered. Realm Lord Dit suddenly threw the explosive meatball out. After throwing it, he pulled the 2 trembling Zo Lords, running away, as Bufong said. Chapter 1162. Sizzle. The meatball, which had been bitten open, shot out rapidly, turning into a golden stream of light as it sped towards the crowd of nether prison experts in the distance. Its flying speed was extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye, it landed in the crowd. Meanwhile, Realm Lord Dit and Zo Lords had already run far away. Before the bewildered Zo Lords could figure out what had happened, they were pulled by Realm Lord Dit. Boom! A loud sound rang out, and a terrifying explosion erupted. A gale rose, and waves of energy soared into the sky. A meatball landed in the middle of a group of nether prison experts. Suddenly it exploded. Resplendent light filled the air, and flames scattered. Miserable howls resounded incessantly as figures were blasted away one after another. The nether prison experts all sucked in a breath of cold air. They had never thought that a meatball in the other party's hand would have such a terrifying explosion. This power was not weaker than the attack of an ordinary 9-star, true immortal realm expert. The will of the Great Path contained within it made each of them shiver in fear. Realm Lord Dit turned around. Seeing that those nether prison experts were scared, he instantly laughed. Come on, come if you can. Come at me together. Realm Lord Dit had 6 explosive meatballs hovering around him. Those meatballs emitted bright light, and each of them contained a terrifying power. The nether prison experts were also scared, not daring to come close. The power of the explosion made them a little scared. This Realm Lord has the meatball in my hand. You all have to bow your heads. Realm Lord Dit laughed, looking incomparably excited. The thing that Bufong Boy came up with is indeed useful. The power of the explosive meatball was actually so terrifying. Exploding the crowd, it was almost fatal. Once it exploded, it would be a pile of people. It directly scared those nether prison experts, and they didn't dare to come forward. Zo Lords was also very surprised that the meatball could be used in this way. Let's buy some time. When Bufong comes back, we'll have a chance to fight back. As long as Bufong, that brat, returns with the spring of life, the heaven tree will be revived, and this realm master and the others won't be able to escape. Dit said. Zo Lord's eyes lit up, and they nodded. Realm Lord, lend me a meatball. Zo Lords nodded and stretched out his hand to take the meatball floating beside Dit. However, he was slapped away by Realm Lord Dit. Don't touch it. What if it suddenly explodes? Realm Master Dit said seriously. The Zo Lords felt a chill down their spine. Thinking about the terrifying power of the explosive meatball, he did not dare to move recklessly. The surrounding nether prison experts did not step forward. It was truly because the power of the meatballs around World Overlord Dit was too strong, too terrifying. They were afraid of being blown to death. Thus, none of them dared to step forward. Suddenly, the crowd parted. A silhouette shot out. A bunch of trash. With a cold curse, the expert clad in a black robe turned into a black shadow, speeding toward Realm Lord Dit. Black nether energy burst out. His aura spread, extremely oppressive. This was also a half-step Saint expert. As soon as he made his move, he approached Realm Lord Dit. A long spear tore through the air and flew toward Realm Lord Dit. It seemed to have turned into a black dragon, roaring and boundless. Realm Lord Dit's pupils constricted. With a long roar, the kitchen knife soared into the sky. Holding in his hand, he swung it down. In an instant, everything in front of him was covered by a terrible knife energy. Realm Lord Dit rushed out and fought with the Nether Prison Half-Step Saint. Knife light and spear shadows blasted in all directions, constantly bombarding the ground around them. The impact caused the ground to shatter continuously. Without the protection of the Heaven Tree, the ground was no longer as strong as before. In front of Half-Step Saint, it was as fragile as paper. Zolord's expression changed. Although his strength was not as strong as a Half-Step Saint, he had reached the 9-star true immortal realm. A pot floated in his hand, and he held it in his hand. At the same time, he rushed out and fought with several 9-star true immortals. However, there were only 2 of them, and they couldn't stop the others. The entrance to the 4th layer had long been exposed, and more Nether Prison experts were rushing toward it. "You're courting death." Realm Lord Dit's eyes shone like torches, his golden hair fluttering in the wind. He took a bite of an explosive meatball and threw it out. The meatball turned into a stream of light and flew toward the entrance. With a loud explosion, flames soared into the sky. A terrible impact spread in all directions. Many Nether Prison experts were blasted away, coughing up blood from their mouths as they were seriously injured. "How dare you be distracted while fighting me?" the Nether Prison Half-Step Saint who wielded the spear sneered. The next moment, the spear pierced through the air like a dragon, turning into a black dragon and biting Realm Lord Dit's arm. However, Realm Lord Dit focused his eyes and grabbed the spear with a backhand, ignoring how the black nether energy corroded his body. "Distracted? Who do you think you are? How dare you show off in front of me?" Realm Lord Dit grinned and bellowed with a cold face. Then, he forcefully pressed an explosive meatball that had been bitten open on the Half-Step Saint's chest. The moment the meatball was pressed against the Half-Step Saint's chest, Realm Lord Dit flew backward. Boom! A loud noise rang out. A terrible explosion broke out. Realm Lord Dit was hit by the impact and rolled twice in the air, then fell to the ground. The Half-Step Saint's miserable howl tore through the sky. His whole body was burning with flames. The terrible burning power, which contained the will of the Great Path, made it impossible for the Half-Step Saint to recover from his injuries. There was a big hole in his chest, and one could see his beating heart. A meatball had seriously injured a Half-Step Saint. Realm Lord Dit shook his arm, and the corrosive nether energy was washed away by his immortal energy. Seeing the Half-Step Saint's miserable condition, Realm Lord Dit sucked in a cold breath. He regretted not asking Bufong for a few more meatballs. Why did he say it was enough back then? He could even fill a basket of meatballs with this kind of power. In the distance, many Nether Prison experts were still watching from outside the Bronze Gate. This was only the first wave, and many real experts had yet to come. Realm Lord Dit already felt a little powerless. There were several Half-Step Saints among them. He had seriously injured one, but before he could kill him, he was caught by the other Half-Step Saints. Fortunately, his strength was considered strong among Half-Step Saints, and he was able to suppress 2 of them. However, he didn't feel the slightest joy in his heart. Instead, he felt more and more desperate. The huge little saint in the distance, who was as huge as a hill, hadn't made a move yet. If the little saint made a move, he couldn't hold on at all. Boom! 2 explosive meatballs exploded. They completely wounded the 2 Half-Step Saints. Realm Lord Dit could finally catch his breath. He turned his head and looked at the Zolords in the distance. At this moment, the Zolords was waving a black walk. His body was already covered with wounds. However, he didn't give up. Holding the black walk, he kept smashing the Nether Prison experts away. At the same time, a new wound would appear on his body. His blood flowed like a fountain. Realm Lord Dit's eyes were very sharp. However, he also felt a little powerless. After all, there were only 2 of them. The Heaven Chief Realm was now in a terrible state. With a rumble, the entrance was blown open. The nether prison experts rushed in from the 5th layer to the 4th layer. The crisis of the Heaven Chief realm's destruction had completely erupted. The nether prison's invasion had completely begun. Realm Lord Dit held the kitchen knife, letting out a long roar. The immortal energy in his body gathered. A knife slashed toward the entrance in the distance, wanting to seal it once again. However, a terrifying oppressive force suddenly erupted. Realm Lord Dit felt a tightness in his chest. A huge cyan palm suddenly slapped down. The knife he slashed out was easily smashed by that cyan palm. Boom! The ground shook violently, and the battlefield suddenly cracked. The falling speed of the 5th layer increased once again. The huge devil's fangs emitted a cold light, coldly looking at Realm Lord Dit. In the next instant, he took a big step. A fist ruthlessly smashed toward Realm Lord Dit. The illusionary void instantly collapsed at this moment. His foot stepped down. Bufong's figure seemed to turn into a shadow, flashing past. From the peak of God-vanishing mountain, Bufong quickly sped down. Boom! Snowflakes flew, and Bufong landed on the snowy ground. The snowstorm struck. Waves of killing intent suddenly filled the air. Bufong's gaze swept around, and the surrounding nether prison experts surrounded him. These nether prison experts were all nether prison geniuses who were training in God-vanishing mountain. Bufong's face was cold. He indifferently said, "Scram." His voice spread out, causing the snowstorm to explode. Those nether prison experts all coldly laughed. God-vanishing mountain peak. If not for the existence in the pool, this fellow would have long been dead. Now, he actually dared to act violently in front of them. Attack together. Kill him. The nether prison experts roared. In the next instant, streams of nether energy rushed into the sky. These people were wrapped in dense killing intent, pressing toward Bufong. These people's cultivation was not weak, and most of them were 9-star true immortal realm. After all, they were geniuses who came to train. Bufong expressionlessly watched. With a move of his mind, cyan smoke curled up from his hand. A dragon roar rang out, shaking the 9 heavens. The dragon bone kitchen knife flashed in his hand. Facing the group of nether prison experts who were rushing over from all directions, Bufong's eyes flashed. Bufong only slashed out one knife. This knife was incomparably slow, like a turtle. One knife, cutting immortal. Bufong lightly roared. In the next instant, a huge phantom seemed to appear behind him. That phantom was very similar to Bufong. Holding a kitchen knife, it slashed down from the sky. It seemed to tear the entire sky apart. One knife, with a poochy sound, scalding blood splattered. One by one, the nether prison experts were sent flying with blood spurting out from their mouths. Those who were slightly weaker were directly cut into 2. One knife to defeat the enemy. Bufong spun the dragon bone kitchen knife in his hand, twirling it, glancing at the group of people. Then he stepped on the snowstorm, speeding away. Very quickly, he came to the place King Biluo had brought him to, crushing the jade talisman. Instantly, a wave of mysterious fluctuations spread out. Fong Fong Ice Cream Shop King Biluo, who was eating a delicious vermilion fruit-flavored ice cream, instantly froze. Then, she scooped a spoonful of ice cream into her mouth. Snapping her fingers, her figure instantly disappeared. When she reappeared, she was already in the snowstorm. King Biluo wore a long red dress, which was wide open, revealing her snow-white long legs. Her red lips pursed the silver spoon, smiling sweetly at Bufong. Found the spring of life. King Biluo looked at Bufong, who was covered in blood energy, and instantly froze. At this moment, the killing intent on Bufong's body was extremely dense, as if he had experienced a massacre. "Yes, we can go back now," Bufong said. The God-vanishing mountain trip was finally over. "Your body." King Biluo furrowed her beautiful brows. "Some trash mixed in the God-vanishing mountain blocked my way, so I took care of them," Bufong said. "Trash?" King Biluo instantly froze. Then, her eyes focused, and a solemn expression flashed across them. Then, she did not ask too much. only deeply looking at the god-vanishing mountain in the snowstorm. Then, she waved her hand. A beam of golden light enveloped Bufang and her, and they disappeared. When they reappeared, they were in the imperial palace. After King Biluo brought Bufang back, she no longer bothered with Bufang, holding the vermilion fruit-flavored ice cream and happily eating it. Bufang turned around, intending to leave. However, before leaving, he suspiciously turned his head to look at King Biluo. "Your Majesty, did you pay for this vermilion fruit-flavored ice cream?" King Biluo's figure instantly froze, as if she was a little flustered and exasperated as she turned her head. "Do I look like the kind of person who doesn't pay for food? When I finish eating, I'll go back and pay. Isn't it because I came to bring you back? My good intentions are not repaid, right?" Bufang tactfully shut his mouth. He was just asking casually. In the next instant, Bufang flew out of the imperial palace. Soon, he returned to Fong Fong Ice Cream Shop. The extraordinarily popular Fong Fong ice cream shop shocked Bufang. Entering the shop, Bufang found Yu, who was happily eating her ice cream, as well as Hua, who was eating bowl after bowl of ice cream beside Yu. You seemed to sense Bufang's gaze, so she looked at him suspiciously. "We have to return to the Heaven Chief Domain," Bufang said solemnly. Yu was bewildered, but she nodded her head. "Okay, wait for me to finish this bowl of ice cream." The corners of Bufang's mouth twitched. "Little Missy, I'm really in a hurry." A while later, the Netherworld ship crossed the sky, tearing the sky. On the deck of the ship, Yu and Hua were happily licking their ice cream cones. Bufang was sitting cross-legged with rapt attention. The illusionary void was torn, and the Netherworld ship entered it. Chapter 1163. In the Heaven Chief Realm, darkness came, and disaster descended. The entire Heaven Chief Realm was in a state of panic. Fortunately, there was still City Lord Ming-Chi, who was their backbone. That was why the people of the Heaven Chief Realm didn't collapse. Everyone retreated in an orderly manner. Everyone in the fourth layer of the Heaven Chief Realm had retreated to the third layer. This was already the limit. If they continued to retreat, no matter how hard Ming-Chi tried to protect the people, everyone would fall into a complete breakdown. Because once they retreated to the second layer, it meant that there was really no hope left. At that time, the only thing left to face the Heaven Chief Realm was true destruction. City Lord Meng-Chi's long robe fluttered as she stood on the tall building of the City Lord Mansion. She looked at the Heaven Tree. The Heaven Tree, which used to be incomparably majestic, exuding dense, immortal energy and supporting the entire Heaven Chief Realm, had now completely declined. Withered lines spread all over the tree, making it look incomparably dry. Rumble. Boundless darkness shrouded the immortal tree, corroding it like maggots in the bones. Everyone was hiding in the immortal city. Outside the city were the roaring beast emperors, and the sky was constantly shrouded in dark nether energy. Everyone felt as if they had been eliminated by the world. They stared blankly at the sky. There was fear, despair, and despair in their eyes. Ming-Chi bit her red lips. She looked at the darkness approaching and the nether energy gushing out of the entrance. She knew that a battle was inevitable. However, she didn't see any hope. The people of the Heaven Chief Realm had stayed in a greenhouse for too long. Although savage beasts attacked the Heaven Chief Realm, with the protection of the immortal city, the savage beasts couldn't hurt the people of the Heaven Chief Realm. Therefore, they had all stayed in a safe environment. Their claws, teeth, and edges had long been worn out, and they had lost their killing intent and morale. How could they resist the nether prison invaders? Sighing, Ming-Chi also felt her heart was heavy. Boom! A loud explosion rang out. At the entrance, nether energy rushed out. Wash away everything. In the next moment, several figures shrouded in pitch black nether chi flew out from the entrance. A terrifying aura filled the sky. An uproar resounded in the minds of everyone in the Heaven Chief Realm. Despair filled the air. The Realm Lord did not guard the entrance. They were all going to die. The Heaven Chief Realm was hopeless. The people of the Heaven Chief Realm were on the verge of a mental breakdown. Cries and cries of despair filled the air. Not many nether prison experts rushed out of the entrance, only 5 in total. However, the auras of these 5 people were very powerful. The weakest of them was at the 8-star true immortal realm. The strongest was a 9-star true immortal. They were wrapped in black robes and surrounded by nether energy. Their gazes turned and locked onto the immortal city below. The immortal city was densely packed with people hiding. These should be a group of cowards from the Heaven Chief realm. The nether prison expert couldn't help laughing. His laughter was filled with undisguised mockery. In the vast Heaven Chief realm, there were only 2 people who stood up to resist the invasion. With just 2 people, they resisted the nether prison army of tens of thousands. The other people from the Heaven Chief realm didn't even show their heads. They only knew how to hide and escape. Indeed, as the Lord had said, the Heaven Chief realm was a greenhouse, and those Heaven Chief realm experts were greenhouse flowers. Once they encountered a little hardship, they would fall apart. What they had to do was to let these greenhouse flowers understand what despair was. "Go!" a nether prison expert roared. In the next moment, his figure shot down like a cannonball, dragging pitch-black nether energy behind him. Turning into a stream of light, he shot toward the immortal city. What they had to do was to completely crush the hope of this group of greenhouse flowers. City Lord Mengxi's immortal robe fluttered as she stood on the city wall, looking at the figures of the 5 nether prison experts rushing down. Her expression didn't change. She looked back at the Heaven Chief realm experts, who were all in despair, and sighed softly. Then, her feet touched the city wall, and her figure shot up into the sky. Majestic, immortal energy filled the air. Turning into a stream of light, she danced toward the 5 nether prison experts. Boom! In an instant, the 2 collided, launching a killing attack. This was an invasion, and no one would hold back. Once they attacked, they would definitely use killing methods. City Lord Mengxi held a light blue kitchen knife in her hand. Her immortal robe fluttered as she resisted the 5 nether prison experts alone. A great battle broke out in the sky. However, in just a moment, City Lord Mengxi was at a disadvantage. The first layer of the Heaven Chief realm. The situation of the first layer was much better than the other layers. Perhaps it was because it was the lowest layer of the Heaven Chief realm, and the nether prison's invasion started from the 5th layer. Hence, the impact on the first layer wasn't that great, mainly because the crisis hadn't spread to the first layer. And now, the main goal of the first layer was to kill those savage beasts that were attacking the city. Gongshu Baiguang had already organized the Heaven Chief realm experts of the first layer to kill the savage beasts. It made the Heaven Chief realm experts of the first layer have a layer of bloodlust. Buzz in front of the Heaven Chief restaurant. The void tore open, and a pitch-black netherworld ship emerged from it. On the deck of the netherworld ship, Bu Fong sat cross-legged, closing his eyes to rest. Nethery and Flowery, on the other hand, grabbed the ice cream cone and kept eating. The ice cream cone was another form of ice cream, but it was very refreshing to eat. No, it should be said that it was licking. The ice cream was eaten, while the ice cream cone was licked. No matter what, it made Yu and Hua feel intoxicated. They returned to the first layer of the Heaven Chief realm. Bufang's eyes focused. Right now, the Heaven Chief realm was shrouded in a layer of death energy. This death energy should be emitted by the Heaven Tree. This Heaven Tree had really declined beyond recognition. At least, when Bufang left the Heaven Chief realm, it hadn't declined to this extent. Indeed, it had dragged on for too long. However, Bufang had no other choice. To obtain the Spring of Life, he had to pay a huge price. Whether it was conquering the female King Biluo at the Imperial Feast or entering the God-vanishing mountain to obtain the Spring of Life, it wasn't that simple. He walked down the netherworld ship. Bufang landed on the ground. He walked toward the Heaven Chief restaurant. He pushed open the door of the store, and a creaking sound resounded. Several figures in the store turned their heads and looked over. Bufang was stunned. On the chairs in the store, several familiar figures were sitting. Xinyuan Xian, Gongshu Yun, and Mu Luer, whom he hadn't seen for a long time. Why were these three women staying in the restaurant? The sound of stir-frying resounded in the kitchen. The Black Dragon King sat at the side, leisurely drinking tea. Compared to the grim situation in the Heaven Chief realm, the atmosphere in the Heaven Chief restaurant was much more harmonious. When Gong Shu Yun and the others saw Bu Fong, their eyes brightened. Xin Yuan Xian's nose was slightly red, and his eyes were sore. Apparently, he had just cried. He didn't expect that Bu Fong would actually come back. He hurriedly used a handkerchief to cover his face, afraid that Bu Fong would see his ugly appearance. "You guys eat and drink well." Bu Fong expressionlessly nodded. Then, he went straight to the kitchen. Dinkling. The curtain of the kitchen was lifted, and the sound of a bell rang out. Cece, who was busy cooking, was stunned. She turned her head and saw Bu Fong walking in. Cece instantly grinned. "Teacher Bu, you're back." Cece was very happy. The decline of the Heaven Chief realm made Cece's heart heavy. Every time Sister Lu came to the restaurant, she would complain, which made Cece unhappy. Now, seeing Bu Fong come back, Cece somehow felt at ease. Bu Fong rubbed Cece's head, scanning the kitchen. At first glance, he saw that Cece was practicing cooking. "Not bad. You've improved." Smelling the aroma of the dishes in the air, Bu Fong slightly arched his brows, glancing at Cece. As expected of a talented little fellow with a celestial tongue, he was indeed a monster. He thought that this little fellow would soon be able to break through to the first-grade immortal chef realm. Thinking about the realm, Bu Fong seemed to remember that he was just an immortal chef, which was a little difficult. It seemed that after this matter, Bu Fong had to improve his cooking skills. At least, he had to reach the second-grade Heaven Chief realm. "CC, continue practicing your knife skills and cooking. I'm going out for a while." When Bu Fong saw that everything was normal in the restaurant, his mood also calmed down. Rubbing Cece's head, Bu Fong turned and left. Walking out of the kitchen, Mu Luer and the others couldn't help but ask when they saw Bu Fong. "Owner Bu, where have you been these days? The Heaven Chief realm is declining, and the savage beasts are attacking the city. I heard that the fifth layer, the Heaven Chief realm, has been occupied by the Nether Prison invaders. Is our home going to be destroyed?" Gong Shu Yun's nose was red as she said, choking with sobs. Bu Fong looked at her, the corners of his mouth rising. "Destroyed? Impossible," Bu Fong said. After saying that, he directly walked out of the restaurant, leaving the three women in a daze. Walking out of the restaurant, Bu Fong's face became serious. His eyes focused. A moment later, his gaze shifted, looking at the city gate. There, the experts of the first layer of the Heaven Chief realm were fighting against the savage beasts. However, the savage beasts were too brutal, and they had suffered heavy casualties. He gently exhaled. Bu Fong clasped his hands, taking a step forward. A moment later, as though he had shrunk the ground to an inch, he shot out, disappearing from his spot. When he reappeared, he was not far from the city gate. Gong Shu Ban was covered in blood, standing on the city wall, panting heavily. Under the city gate, there were countless savage beast corpses, as well as the bodies of the Heaven Chief realm's experts. However, at a glance, the horde of beasts didn't look like it was going to end. The Heaven Chief on the city wall looked tired. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The savage beasts had coarse skin and thick flesh. Ferociously, they hit the city wall, causing the entire wall to shake as though it was about to collapse. Once the city wall collapsed, those savage beasts would charge into the immortal city without any scruples, starting to slaughter and destroy. If that happened, the entire immortal city would become hell on earth. However, they were really tired. Although they had relied on their bravery to endure until now, they didn't have the strength to resist anymore. The Heaven Chief realm had declined, and the immortal energy had become thin. It would take them a long time to recover their strength. Rumble, rumble. In the distance, a beast roared. It was a one-horned, giant rhinoceros beast emperor. Its entire body seemed to be wrapped in iron, and its roar was as sharp as a spear. Galloping, the rhinoceros horn aimed at the city wall. Everyone's faces turned deathly pale. The experts of the Gongshu family, the Luo family, and the other families in the immortal city all had bloodless faces. No one could stop this rhinoceros charge. Boom! The rhinoceros horn hit the city gate. The city wall instantly shattered, and a big hole was created by the rhinoceros horn. Countless pieces of rubble flew out. A big hole was created in the city wall. The rhinoceros's roar shook the sky, rumbling as it stepped into the city. Behind it, groups of savage beasts followed. The savage beast tide had finally broken the immortal city. All the experts on the city wall were in despair. They had used all their strength, but they still couldn't stop this beast tide. The immortal city was going to be destroyed in a day. Suddenly, Gongshu Ban's eyes focused. He looked into the distance. There, at the place where the giant rhinoceros had charged, a figure clasped his hands behind his back, walking at a leisurely pace. That familiar figure made Gongshu Ban's eyes tremble. Then, a wave of hope burst forth. It's the great demon. It's Onurbu. Onurbu. He's back. Gongshu Ban didn't know why, but his heart suddenly exploded with excitement. What's the use of coming back? Can he stop the beast tide alone? It's useless. Heaven Chief Realm's doomsday has come. No one can change it. We should have complied with the destruction of Heaven Chief Realm. After struggling, we still failed. It's so hard to bear. However, it was different from Gongshu Ban's excitement. The people around didn't feel any hope. That's right. Onurbu had returned, but what was the use? Facing the beast tide, could the one-star, true, immortal realm, the great demon, create a miracle? Fighting against the beast tide wasn't a competition of cooking skills. That was something that could only be resisted with one's cultivation. The smile on Gongshu Ban's face froze. Yeah, so what if Onurbu had returned? For a moment, he couldn't help but close his eyes in despair. Bu Fong clasped his hands behind his back, walking. In front of him, the ground shook and the city wall was smashed. A giant rhinoceros roared crazily as it charged out of the city, its brutal aura spreading everywhere. Behind the giant rhinoceros was a horde of rampaging beasts. Bu Fong's eyes were bewildered. The immortal city was broken just like that. Clasping his hands, he looked at the blood-soaked group of people on the city wall, their auras dispirited. Bu Fong couldn't help but stay silent. Actually, they had tried their best. He exhaled softly. Bu Fong looked at the giant rhinoceros, his face emotionless. The latter's scarlet eyes shot out murderous intent, trampling on Bu Fong. Anyone who stood in its way would be trampled flat. This was a 6-star beast emperor. In this layer of Heaven Chief Realm, it was considered an invincible existence. Its skin was rough, and its flesh was thick. However, to the current Bu Fong, they were all trash. Bu Fong clasped his hands, standing at a spot. The vermilion robe on his body suddenly turned scarlet. A bird cry soared up into the sky. The pair of flaming wings on his back opened, and flaming feathers fluttered. In his head, the scripture shone brightly, and his spirit sea surged with monstrous waves. Standing at his spot, his divine perception covered the entire city. A terrifying aura and pressure burst out from Bu Fong's body, as if it wanted to break through the sky. His divine perception filled the air. Each of the beasts seemed to be stunned. A moment later, a terrifying voice suddenly exploded in their heads. Get lost! Boom! The sound waves exploded like the evening drum and morning bell. Every single ferocious beast's body trembled, and they directly knelt on the ground. Their bodies were scattered all over the place, and they trembled in fear. On the city wall, everyone was dumbfounded, sucking in a breath of cold air. The great demon king actually resisted 10,000 beasts all by himself. So ferocious. Chapter 1164. Boom! The giant rhinoceros's body suddenly shook. Its legs bent, falling to the ground. The huge figure rushed forward, leaving deep ravines on the ground. The ravines were crisscrossed and stacked up. Bu Fong clasped his hands behind his back. indifferently looking at the giant rhinoceros that was gliding toward him. The latter's sharp horn was aimed at his body. However, Bufong didn't have the slightest bit of fear or retreat. He raised his palm. He aimed it at the rhinoceros's horn. Then, with a loud bang, a thunderous boom resounded. The giant rhinoceros's head hit him, but Bufong easily caught it with his palm. It couldn't move an inch. On the city wall, everybody was dumbstruck. That giant rhinoceros was a 6-star beast emperor. Its power was so formidable. In the first layer of the Heaven Chief realm, it was an invincible existence. The great demon was just a 1-star true immortal realm expert. How could he resist it? How could he resist it? Gong Shuban and the others dropped their jaws, astonished. Bufong's behavior was beyond their imagination. All of a sudden, everybody's eyes shrank, because they found that Bufong's palm suddenly squeezed. The giant rhinoceros's sharp horn was shattered at this moment. The densely packed, veined patterns on it exploded with a loud bang, turning into scattered fragments that flew out and scattered all over the ground. Hiss! Hiss! Everybody took in a breath of cold air. They felt an incomparably powerful aura coming toward them. It was the great demon, the incomparably powerful, the great demon, who never stopped creating miracles. After crushing the giant rhinoceros's sharp horn, Bufong's eyes shifted, falling on the giant rhinoceros. The latter crouched on the ground, not daring to move. It wasn't only because of Bufong's 9-star, true immortal realm aura. It was mainly because of the divine dragon and vermilion bird auras bursting out from Bufong's body. This aura made all the savage beasts here not dare to move. Of course, the most important thing was the scene of Bufong's divine sense exploding in their minds. Savage beasts respected the strong. If Bufong's divine sense could explode in their minds, it meant that Bufong could easily kill them. Behind the giant rhinoceros, there was a large group of ferocious beasts crawling on the ground. They no longer looked as ferocious as before. All of them were kneeling on the ground, trembling. A 6-star, true immortal realm rhinoceros. Bufong sized up the giant rhinoceros expressionlessly. Finally, he raised his hand and patted the latter's head. There was a loud buzzing sound. The giant rhinoceros disappeared into Bufong's heaven and earth farmland. This rhinoceros was of a good grade. It could be used as an ingredient or as a laborer. Nyohan-san would probably like this extra helper. As for the other beasts, Bufong's eyes became cold again. The divine perception spread out like a ripple, exploding in the minds of all the beasts. Get out! The deafening explosion stirred the fierce beasts restlessly. In the end, some beasts couldn't stand it anymore. They turned around, stamping their 4 hooves, crazily dashing toward the broken city gate. In just a short while, they disappeared. With one beast like that, there would be a second one. Then, under Bufong's pressure, almost all the beasts turned around and fled. Their 4 limbs moved, causing a tremor as they dashed out of the broken city gate. The beast tide ended just like that. The group of blood-soaked people on the city wall were still in a trance. Until now, they still couldn't believe what had happened. Even now, they didn't know what had happened. Is it over? The beast tide ended just like that? We survived? The great demon saved us. The people on the city wall murmured in bewilderment. Bufong clasped his hands, indifferently glancing at the people on the city wall. He didn't say a word. From the big hole in the city wall, a group of beasts scattered in the dust, fleeing in panic. Bufong gently exhaled. He didn't greet the people present. His feet stomped on the ground. A moment later, his body shot out like a cannonball, soaring up into the sky. In just a blink of an eye, he dashed into the clouds, disappearing. Rumble. The giant devil punched out, shaking heaven and earth. It was as if the entire sky had collapsed under this punch. Realm Overlord Dit's eyes shrank. His figure kept treading in the void. However, the fist continued to smash towards him, closing in on his body as if it was going to crush him to pieces. Realm Overlord Dit roared, his light blonde hair fluttering unceasingly. All the explosive meatballs in his hands were shot out by him, and they all smashed towards the giant green fist. Boom, boom, boom. On the giant green fist, explosions reverberated unceasingly. Flames spread out, and destructive fluctuations spread out. However, this punch didn't cause any damage to the giant devil. Although the skin on the fist was char black, its power didn't decrease, smashing down hard. It hit Realm Overlord Dit's body. Realm Overlord Dit also drew a knife, slashing over. Boom! Waves of air exploded in the void. Space cracks constantly spread out, whipping the void. The surrounding nether prison experts moved aside, each of them revealing a look of excitement. A streak of golden light shot out at high speed. Realm Overlord Dit's figure was shot out like a cannonball, smashing in the distance. With a boom, he smashed on the ground, causing it to explode. In the distance, Zoe Lords was covered in blood. The numerous wounds had wiped out his elegance from the past. Now, he looked incomparably wretched. Blood flowed from his wounds, which looked very shocking. One by one, the experts surrounded him, like a cornered beast fighting for its life. He, who was alone, could only do this. Rubble fell. Realm Overlord Dit crawled out of the rubble with blood at the corner of his mouth. On the Heaven Nether Bridge in the distance, the Nether Prison Army was still invading. The sky-covering nether energy almost filled his chest, wiping out his last bit of hope. He really couldn't accept this. If not for the Heaven Tree's decline, how could these Nether Prison experts have the chance to attack Heaven Chief Realm? If Heaven Chief Realm was at its peak, where did these Nether Prison experts get the courage to attack Heaven Chief Realm? At its peak, Heaven Chief Realm had divine chefs, and there were dozens of Chelan chefs. Who dared to provoke that kind of existence? The giant devil coldly glanced at him, smashing his fist on the ground. The ground instantly cracked again, as though it was about to completely collapse. Who was the one who blew me up? Tell me. Otherwise, I'll tear you apart. The giant devil bared his fangs, letting out an angry roar. His voice shook the heavens. Boom! The huge figure instantly disappeared from its spot, as though it had teleported. When it reappeared, Realm Overlord Dit only felt a patch of darkness appear. Then, a sky-covering palm fiercely slapped towards Realm Overlord Dit. Boom! With a slap, the ground instantly cracked, completely shattering. A figure turned into a beam of golden light, shooting out from within. Realm Overlord Dit panted violently. The golden armor on his body was already completely covered in cracks, with pieces falling from it. He glanced at the Zoe Lords in the distance, who had almost lost his will and was holding a black walk to support his body. The latter's true energy had been emptied, and he was standing with only his physical body. He was like a lamp that had run out of oil. A wave of sorrow suddenly spread in Realm Overlord Dit's chest. When had Heaven Chief Realm ever suffered such a sin? Clenching his fists, Realm Overlord Dit's eyes revealed endless anger. Unforgivable! With a long roar, Realm Overlord Dit's body seemed to burst out with dazzling golden light. His entire body seemed to have turned into a small blazing sun. Fifth floor of Heaven Chief Realm, at the top of the Heaven Tree, in a wooden house. Yaya sat cross-legged in the wooden house. Her eyes were serious, looking at everything in the wooden house. A moment later, a wisp of immortal energy appeared in her hand. She patted. Suddenly, a magic formation burst out from the wooden house. A magic formation spun inside. A beam of light shot out from within and suddenly fell down. The light beam pierced the sky, shooting at Realm Overlord Dit's body. Realm Overlord Dit's aura kept rising. Soon, he broke through the shackles. Above his head, there seemed to be a hazy cloud moving. It was the will of the great path of the Heaven Chief Realm. Although it was extremely weak, it still existed. Boom! Realm Overlord Dit's eyes shot out golden light. At this moment, he wasn't joking anymore. He looked extremely serious. Forcefully breaking through to the little saint realm, he grinned, then clenched his fists, smiling coldly. Boom! 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 As soon as he finished speaking, his feet stomped, and his body shot out once again. He charged toward Realm Overlord Dit. He punched out. Realm Overlord Dit's body glowed with golden light. A moment later, he also turned into a beam of light, punching out, clashing with the giant devil's fist. An explosion boomed. The terrifying wind and waves stirred up mottled cracks. The entire fifth floor of Heaven Chief Realm seemed to be completely destroyed at this moment. Bufong's body was like a fiery red cannonball, zooming out, shooting straight up into the sky. He passed the second floor in a flash. Countless people in the Immortal City saw Bufong's figure, staring at Bufong. For a moment, all kinds of feelings welled up in their hearts. The third floor of the Heaven Chief Realm. At the entrance, Bufong turned into a beam of fiery red light and rushed out, arriving in a flash. The flaming wings on his back spread out, and Bufong gently landed on the ground. This chick's strength isn't bad. Let's see how long this woman can last. Capture her alive. The Nether Prison Lord will definitely like this kind of woman. The Nether Prison experts' faces were full of ridicule. Although Mengqi was the lord of a city, how could she be a match for the five of them? She was being toyed with by them. Mengqi's face was cold, expressionless. The kitchen knife in her hand swept out, constantly slashing out knife energy. Her immortal robe fluttered, her sleeves fluttering. Although she was at a disadvantage, she didn't look too embarrassed. However, she was also a little anxious in her heart, because she was very clear that the more she fought, the worse the situation would get. Her strength was limited, after all. When her true energy declined, she wouldn't be able to resist. The anxiety in her heart caused her attacks to be full of flaws. The Heaven Chief in the Immortal City became more and more desperate as they watched. City Lord Mengqi was being toyed with like this. What hope did they have? Everyone's faith seemed to be slowly collapsing at this moment. City Lord Mengqi glanced at him, instantly feeling a little bad. However, you still dare to be distracted by a bunch of trash? A Nether Prison expert sneered coldly. In the next instant, he suddenly appeared in front of City Lord Mengqi. A palm shot out, and the air seemed to explode from the pressure. That palm suddenly patted City Lord Mengqi's shoulder. City Lord Mengqi's eyes shrank. Feeling the nether energy enter her body, the true energy in her body was sealed, unable to be used. At this moment, her face suddenly became deathly pale. Her immortal robe was also torn, unable to provide any defense. She spat out a mouthful of blood. Mengqi's figure flew backward. However, she didn't fly too far away. With a swishing sound, the pitch-black chains suddenly fell. They wrapped around her limbs, capturing her like a prisoner. The Nether Prison experts grabbed the chains in their hands. All of them couldn't help but burst out laughing. Their laughter reverberated through the entire heaven and earth. It made everyone in the Immortal City wail in despair. It's over. Everything is over. Despair shrouded the Immortal City, as if doomsday had arrived. Mengqi also half opened her eyes, feeling the strength in her body rapidly fading. She had tried her best. Suddenly, a bird's cry rang out. City Lord Mengqi, whose eyes were half opened, suddenly felt a wave of heat approaching, supporting her body. Her eyes instantly narrowed, turning her head to look. Then, she saw an indifferent face. That familiar face caused her to fall into a trance. "You are back," Mengqi was almost whispering. Bufong gave her a look, then looked at the chains. The dragon bone kitchen knife appeared in his hand, suddenly chopping down. The 4 chains instantly shattered. The flaming wings on his back spread out. Bufong patted Xiaopi on his shoulder, and the latter turned into a stream of light, carrying Mengqi's body as it sped away. Then, Bufong held the dragon bone kitchen knife with one hand, slowly turning his head, looking at the 5 Nether Prison experts in the void. Opening his mouth, he gently let out a breath. "I made it." Chapter 1165. Finally caught up, Bufong's faint voice resounded in the sky. His voice wasn't loud, but it rang in everyone's ears. Mengqi was supported by Xiaopi. Her body had recovered some strength, so she sat up. Xiaopi's speed was very fast. The strong wind caused her hair to flutter. Her beautiful eyes looked at Bu Fong in the distance. Seeing Bu Fong's appearance, her beautiful eyes suddenly burst out with hope. She knew what Bu Fong was going to do. Bu Fong went to Earth Prison to look for the spring of life in order to save the seed of the Heaven Tree. Bu Fong's return was equivalent to the return of hope of the Heaven Chief realm. Did Bu Fong really find the spring of life and come back with hope? Mengqi watched with hope. She sincerely hoped that all of this was true. She didn't want Bu Fong to return empty-handed. Xiaopi brought City Lord Mengqi, speeding all the way. A golden light flashed, and in an instant, they returned to the immortal city, placing Mengqi on the city wall. In the next instant, Xiaopi once again turned into a beam of golden light, shooting up into the sky, speeding in the direction of Bu Fong. The surrounding gazes were cast over. It made Mengqi freeze. Mengqi looked over and found that the eyes of the Heaven Chief on the city wall were filled with fear. Mengqi sighed. If the Heaven Chief realm could survive this time, she was afraid the entire Heaven Chief realm would have to go through a big reform. After staying in a greenhouse for too long, one's courage would be worn out. Suddenly, Mengqi froze. Bu Fong's opponents were 5 nether prison experts. Even the weakest among them had the abilities of an 8-star true god. Could Bu Fong deal with such an opponent? Thinking of this, Mengqi's face turned pale. The wind blew. Bu Fong's hair fluttered. The velvet rope that was binding her hair had already snapped at some point in time. His vermilion robe was crimson in color, and the 2 pairs of flaming wings on his back were unfurled, with flaming feathers swirling in the air. He held the dragon bone kitchen knife in his hand, which looked as if it was made of gold. Someone from the Heaven Chief realm actually dares to stand out? So there are men in the Heaven Chief realm? Ha ha! After letting a woman stand out for so long, it's time for a man to come out and die. The nether prison experts burst out laughing. They looked at Bu Fong with ridicule in their eyes. In their eyes, Bu Fong was just a nobody who came out to die. They couldn't sense how strong Bu Fong's cultivation was. However, in the Heaven Chief realm, besides the Realm Lord and a few city lords, there was no one in the Heaven Chief realm that could catch their attention. Hence, Bu Fong's appearance was nothing in their eyes. Finally caught up? Ha ha ha, finally caught up to die? A nether prison expert mocked. In the next instant, a powerful aura spread out. Above his head, the curtain of stars twinkled and the 7 stars bloomed. His figure turned into a stream of light, speeding toward Bu Fong. Bu Fong calmly watched as he floated in the void. The flaming wings on his back flapped, constantly stirring up strong winds. Looking at the figure speeding over, Bu Fong didn't move. He slowly raised the dragon bone kitchen knife. The thumping sound of a heartbeat resounded through the sky. The heart of cooking path throbbed, and the knife intent bloomed to the extreme. One knife. Bu Fong looked at the nether prison phantom that was constantly moving in the void, calmly saying. The wind blew against his vermilion robe, flickering like flames. Arrogant. Presumptuous. The nether prison expert roared. Pitch-black nether energy soared into the sky. His fists were held horizontally at his waist. Then he suddenly rushed forward. In the next instant, 2 ferocious beast shadows rushed over Roar. 2 beast roars filled the sky, crushing the void, suppressing everything. A terrifying pressure filled the sky. It made everyone in the immortal city cower, hiding in a corner, not daring to say a word. City Lord Mengqi's eyes also shrank. She clenched her fists, her heart extremely nervous, cutting immortal style. Swish. The dragon bone kitchen knife fiercely slashed down. Majestic true energy exploded from Bu Fong's body. Bu Fong's eyes flashed. In his mind, there seemed to be the roar of dragons, tigers, birds, and turtles. Waves rose in his spirit's sea, and the golden scripture shone brilliantly. His divine perception rushed out like a whirlwind, like a shock wave hitting the nether prison expert's mind. It caused the latter's spirit's sea to suddenly explode. His eyes were slightly dazed, and his will became hazy. Behind Bu Fong, a huge phantom emerged. The phantom held a kitchen knife in its hand, and the kitchen knife slashed down horizontally. The sky seemed to be torn apart. In everyone's eyes, that knife light was extremely dazzling. Swish! The knife slashed down. The knife light flashed. The beast head condensed of nether energy was cut in half. That nether prison expert was also cut in half. Blood spurted out. He fell. His eyes were still filled with disbelief. Suddenly, with a boom, it exploded. That nether prison expert was dead. Dumbfounded. Everyone was stunned. Whether it was the nether prison expert or the heaven chief in the immortal city, they were all dumbstruck. One knife killed a 9-star, true immortal realm existence. Who was this? Why was he so strong? It's the great demon. Someone recognized Bufong, instantly opening his mouth and shouting. It's really the great demon. Oh my God, is the great demon so strong? Killing a 9-star, true immortal with one knife. The great demon is invincible. The immortal city was completely boiling. Everyone was so excited that their faces turned red. The great demon was a miracle that shrouded everyone's hearts. Today, the great demon had appeared, once again bringing them a miracle. One person killing a 9-star true immortal realm. Was this really something that the 1-star true immortal realm, the great demon, could do? No. The great demon is no longer a 1-star true immortal. Not for a long time. Someone shouted excitedly. Look at the great demon's aura. It's far beyond 1 star. Even City Lord Ming-Chi seems to be a bit weaker than him. Could it be that the great demon is already a 9-star true immortal? How could the great demon's cultivation break through so quickly? Everyone was incomparably shocked. Someone recognized Bufong's cultivation. 9-star true immortal realm. That kind of cultivation was something that everyone could only look up to. Naturally, Bufong did not care about what the people below were shocked about. After killing a nether prison expert with one knife, Bufong's gaze turned, landing on a few nether prison experts in the distance. It seems that we were wrong, but stubbornly resisting. It's useless. The destruction of the Heaven Chief realm is already destined. You can't change anything, the nether prison expert said coldly. Oh, Bufong replied expressionlessly. Bufong's indifferent reply made the nether prison experts freeze. So, if you surrender now, I'll spare your life. That nether prison expert's eyes narrowed as he said coldly. Bufong froze. Then, he gave that nether prison expert a strange look. Do you think I'm an idiot? Bufong said. As his voice faded, Bufong opened his mouth. A mass of white flame instantly shot out, turning into a sky curtain that burned everything. It was as if the entire sky had turned into a sea of fire. Bufong stretched out a palm. His mind flickered. The sea of fire instantly spread, turning into a white, flaming palm that blotted out the sky. Under the control of his divine perception, the sky-covering flaming palm instantly slapped toward the remaining 4 nether prison experts. A long time ago, Bufong wanted to feel the feeling of killing someone with one slap. However, his cultivation base had always been weak. Back then, the Lord Go's exquisite dog paw was invincible. Now, Bufong had also learned the exquisite fire palm. Boom! The scorching flame carried a terrifying power. The 4 nether prison experts all summoned up their nether energy, wanting to resist. However, what horrified them was that even the nether aura was being incinerated by the flames. Damn it! What kind of flame is this? The nether prison experts roared. Their figures turned into arrows, shooting toward the distance. However, as soon as they rushed out, their pupils constricted. There, Bufong, clad in a scarlet vermilion robe, looked back indifferently. In his hand was a black wok. Facing the 4 experts who were rushing over, he suddenly swung the black wok. Swish! The void seemed to be constantly collapsing under this wok. The void collapsed. The black wok became bigger. The 4 experts' pupils constricted. In the next moment, they were all hit by the black wok. Bam! 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 The black wok and their faces intimately touched, and the sound of bones breaking rang out. The bridge of their nose was smashed in an instant, and the sour, sweet, bitter, and spicy taste rushed into their minds. They were so depressed that they almost vomited blood. Boom! 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 The four of them were blasted away, smashing into the city wall, deeply embedded in it. Gravel rolled down. The four of them had no power to resist, smashed by this wok. Bufang held the black wok. The flames that filled the sky dissipated, turning into a small spark that danced on Bufang's palm. "Okay, I'll leave the rest to you," Bufang said indifferently. After saying that, he planned to head toward the fourth layer of the Heaven Chief realm. He was already a little anxious. In his divine perception, he could feel that the will of the great path of the Heaven Chief realm was constantly weakening. It seemed that he had to find Realm Lord Dit quickly and help him revive the seed of the Heaven Tree. In the Immortal City, a group of cowering people climbed out of the city wall, dragging down the four people embedded in it. The Heaven Chief, who had been dominated by fear for a long time, was now filled with anger. They had actually thought of resisting, but their ability was limited. Now that there were enemies in front of them, these four people became their vent. All kinds of attacks came crashing down. The four people had long been unable to resist. They could only watch in horror as the densely packed attacks engulfed them. The spread of panic completely disappeared at this moment. On the city wall, City Lord Mengshi looked at Bufang with a complicated look in her eyes. She had been having a headache about how to control the spread of panic in the Immortal City. It was such a headache for her, but Bufang solved it so easily. Bufang turned around. Suddenly, his mind flickered, and he frowned as he looked at the entrance. There, another wave of mighty nether energy spread over. It was as if a terrible existence was about to come out of that entrance. The nether prison invaders were coming again. Everyone stopped what they were doing and raised their heads to look at the entrance in the sky. Bufang hovered in midair, the flaming wings on his back spread out, flaming feathers fluttering. He raised a hand and patted little Hu, who was ready to make a move on his shoulder. His divine perception moved. Immediately, golden steaming explosive pissing meatballs floated around his body. Roar! At the entrance, nether energy rushed out. A swarm of nether prison experts rushed out and charged toward the ground. Like a swarm of locusts, they blotted out the sky. The Heaven Chief in the Immortal City was trembling. The nether prison expert, whose face was swollen and body was covered in blood, burst out laughing. "You're dead, all of you. The nether prison invades. Not even a blade of grass will grow." Bam! However, he had only said a few words when he was once again pressed to the ground by the Heaven Chief and beaten up. Little Hu sniffed the explosive meatballs floating around Bufang. His eyes narrowed slightly as he licked his lips. However, Bufang had already fed him until he was full. It would be of great use later, so he naturally didn't need to use it now. His mind flickered. The explosive meatballs floated around Bufang's body. With a flick of his finger, he flicked it. 7 explosive meatballs were bitten open, emitting sizzling steam as they turned into golden light and sped away. They looked like 7 golden shooting stars. They sped toward the nether prison army that was coming out of the entrance. Destruction was imminent. Chapter 1166. The nether prison army rushed out of the entrance like a swarm of locusts, sending chills down anyone's spine at first glance. However, for Bufang, this was not a problem. The 7 explosive meatballs seemed to turn into 7 shooting stars. Sizzling hot air rose, like a long tail streaking across the sky, shooting out rapidly. Bufang also discovered that the power of the explosive meatballs was even stronger when used to attack a group of people. The instant explosion caused a chain reaction, which was simply a nightmare for the enemies. Monstrous nether energy surged. As soon as these nether prison experts came out of the 4th layer, they found Bufang. Of course, they also found the 7 explosive meatballs. In their eyes, these were just 7 meatballs. The spinning meatballs were like shooting stars streaking across the sky, instantly falling into the crowd. In the next moment, the nether prison experts were slightly stunned. Boom, boom, boom. A few consecutive explosions rang out. Terrifying explosions rumbled in an instant, and flames soared into the sky. The 7 explosive meatballs exploded in chain, causing a destructive wave that seemed to destroy everything. The sky was swallowed by endless flames. The Heaven Chief, who were fighting, couldn't help but stop and look at the sky. There a mushroom cloud was blooming, slowly spreading, and in an instant it filled the air. What a terrifying explosion! This was the first thought in everyone's mind. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. The great demon had really become more and more terrifying. There were so many nether prison experts. Could they all be killed by the 7 meatballs? Bufong clasped his hands, standing in the void. The flaming wings on his back were stretching out. He was not in a hurry to continue attacking. Looking at the surging fire cloud, soon the fire cloud dissipated. One by one, the nether prison experts fell to the ground, howling miserably. Bufong looked indifferently, his expression not changing in the slightest. Of course, although the 7 explosive meatballs had great lethality, it was certainly impossible to kill all of them. It might be possible to use the perishing pot. Bufong's mind flickered, and a magic array appeared beside him. Xiaopi, who was lying on Bufong's shoulder, immediately perked up. The formation spun. Soon, lightning arcs crackled and shot out from within. A series of mechanical sounds rang out. Then, Xiao Bai's figure emerged from within. Whitey had finally completed its evolution. The lightning that had condensed on its body was filled with a frightening and destructive aura. The mechanical eyes sparkled. Xiao Bai, it's time to exercise. Bufong glanced at Xiao Bai and said lightly. His words fell. The metal wings on Xiao Bai's back opened with a clanging sound, and armor appeared on his body. His fan-like palm took out a war god stick from the vortex in his abdomen. The war god stick was like a soldering iron with lightning arcs flashing on it. The mechanical eyes twinkled. Xiao Bai's gaze locked on the nether prison experts in the distant void who hadn't been killed by the explosive meatballs. Xiaopi squeaked, then soared into the sky, turning into a giant creature. Xiao Bai stepped on Shrimpy, shooting out, flying toward the nether prison experts in the distance. These nether prison experts were also very confused. It wasn't easy to enter the 3rd layer, the Heaven Chief realm. In the end, as soon as they appeared, they experienced a terrifying explosion that could destroy heaven and earth. Countless people were injured and killed. Those who could survive were basically 9-star, true immortal realm experts. These experts had tough bodies. Even if the explosive meatballs contained the will of the Great Path, it wasn't easy to kill them. Damn it! How dare you trick us? Unforgivable! All of you must die. The nether prison experts gritted their teeth. They were almost wiped out, which made them feel angry. Xiao Bai stood on Xiaopi's shoulder, his eyes unchanging. Bufong clasped his hands, watching with interest. He was very curious to see what level Xiao Bai's fighting strength had reached. Boom! Nether prison tornadoes soared into the sky. These were all 9-star true immortal realm experts, so their fighting strength wasn't bad. However, Xiao Bai didn't have the slightest fear. The war god stick swept out without hesitation. Boom! Boom! Suddenly, the 2 people riding on Xiaopi's shoulder suddenly burst out lightning. Perhaps it was because of the lightning. Xiaopi and Xiao Bai's speed suddenly increased. They directly crossed the void. The war god stick instantly smashed the head of a nether prison expert. That instantaneous burst of speed shocked everyone. Like lightning, it seemed to jump in the void. The nether prison 9-star, true immortal realm experts couldn't even react. The Heaven Chief on the city wall also sucked in a breath of cold air. Of course, they knew about the great demon's Earth Immortal Puppet. In the Heaven Chief competition, that Earth Immortal Puppet had shone brilliantly. However, no matter how brilliantly it shone, it was just a King Earth Immortal Puppet. It could actually kill a 9-star true immortal realm expert. Could it be that this Earth Immortal Puppet had already become a Heaven Immortal Puppet? Even a Heaven Immortal Puppet might not have such lethality, right? Sure enough, anything that was related to the great demon king could become possible. Xiao Bai's eyes flashed, cold and merciless. Bu Fong looked at Xiao Bai, feeling that Xiao Bai had human emotions. Of course, Bu Fong didn't care. Even if Xiao Bai really became an adult, he was still Xiao Bai. Sizzle, sizzle. Lightning arcs flashed. The war god stick kept enlarging in the eyes of those nether prison true immortal realm experts. There was a loud explosion. One by one, their heads exploded like broken watermelons. Just for a while, all the nether prison experts had fallen. Xiao Bai held the war god stick with one hand as lightning arcs moved on its surface. Bu Fong was very satisfied. It seemed the imperial feast in Goddess City hadn't been in vain. After eating so many lightning strikes, Xiao Bai had finally reached a higher level. Xiao Bai, kill your way to the 5th floor of Heaven Chief Realm, Bu Fong said. It seemed he had received Bu Fong's order. Xiao Bai nodded. The metal wings on his back flapped. Then, he grabbed Xiao Bai and flew toward the entrance, disappearing in just a short while. Bu Fong breathed a soft sigh of relief, then strode forward and followed them at full speed. Meng Qi clenched her teeth. She also wanted to go and fight with them, but she was seriously injured, and she didn't have the ability to fight anymore. If she went, she would just be a burden. It wasn't what she wanted. Thus, she could only hope that Bu Fong could create another miracle. She hoped that Bu Fong could save the Heaven Chief Realm from the brink of destruction. She hoped that Bu Fong could really bring back the spring of life. From the 3rd floor to the 4th, Bu Fong finally understood why Meng Qi would retreat to the 3rd floor with the Heaven Chief Realm experts. The 4th floor sky had become very low, as if it could be touched by raising one's hand. Rumbling sounds rang out unceasingly. The 5th floor kept falling, about to hit the 4th floor. The sky was densely covered in cracks, as if the sky was about to collapse. The situation had become very serious. Bu Fong's eyes focused. He didn't want to waste any more time. Following Xiao Bai, who had turned into a bolt of lightning, he headed toward the entrance of the 5th floor. Boom! A booming sound rang out. As soon as Xiao Bai reached the entrance of the 5th floor, he started to fight with the nether prison experts. Obviously, the entrance of the 5th floor was blocked by the nether prison experts. According to Meng Qi, the Zhou Lords and Realm Lord Dit were fighting against so many nether prison experts in the 5th floor. Bu Fong had to find Realm Lord Dit, because he needed the seed in Realm Lord Dit's body. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes widened as he was blocked. A moment later, the iron on the war god stick seemed to come to life. It enlarged, turning thick and big as it smashed toward the entrance. The sound of explosions rang out unceasingly. The stick was forcibly stuffed into the entrance. Xiao Bai's fan-like palm pressed on the surface of the war god stick, as if he wanted to suppress them. On the other side of the war god stick, many nether prison experts used all their strength to resist the war god stick's impact. The flame wings on Bu Fong's back spread, and his figure instantly flew to Xiao Bai's side. Looking at the war god stick, he slowly stretched out his slender and fair palm. His palm pressed on the war god stick. A wave of lightning numbness instantly entered his palm through the war god stick. Bu Fong slightly raised his brows. Then, he suddenly exerted force. Rumble! A huge force suddenly burst out. A moment later, the Taoye's roar was ear-splitting. The bandage on Bu Fong's hand scattered. The war god stick completely smashed down, breaking through the blockade. In an instant, the nether prison experts were smashed into pieces by the staff. Figures were sent flying, vomiting blood. Some people's arms were even shattered. The war god stick rushed out of the 5th floor. Shortly, it became smaller and thinner, held in Xiao Bai's hand. The entrance to the 5th floor had long been destroyed. The entire 5th floor was filled with a murderous atmosphere. The aura of destruction shrouded everything. Bu Fong clasped his hands, his entire body scarlet as he scanned the entire place. The once bustling 5th layer of the immortal cooking realm was now reduced to ruins and ruins. The entrance to the 5th floor had obviously been destroyed many times, but it was still open. In the distance, terrifying fluctuations spread out. Bufong couldn't help but look over. He saw Realm Lord Dit fighting with a giant demon that was dozens of feet tall. They were fighting so hard that they couldn't separate. Realm Lord Dit's body was covered in golden light. He had borrowed the will of the great path of the Heaven Chief Realm. It was a tragic battle. All of a sudden, Bufong's eyes shrank. He turned his head, looking into the distance. There, Zolord's body was covered in blood. He had almost lost his consciousness, relying on his hot blood to support his body with the Black Walk. The nether prison experts around him surrounded him so tightly that not even a drop of water could escape. Bufong's eyes became much more complicated. He looked at Realm Lord Dit, then at Zolord, who was surrounded by a group of nether prison experts. Eventually, his mind flickered. His figure instantly turned into a flaming vermilion bird, soaring into the void and flying rapidly in the direction of City Lord Zo. Come on, you bunch of beasts. I can still fight. Come on, let me poke you to death. Zolord muttered unconsciously, blood dripping from his mouth and nose. His true energy had been emptied, and now he didn't even have the strength to truss a chicken. The surrounding nether prison experts seemed to be a little scared. They didn't dare to make a move, just watching carefully, because no one knew if this fellow still had a way to die together with them. Swish! The sound of something breaking the air rang out. The heart of a nether prison expert, who was about to kill Zolord, instantly tightened. In the next instant, a war god stick that was like a hot iron smashed in front of him, sending debris flying. Bufong, Xiao Bai, and Xiao Opi slowly approached. In just a flash, the nether prison experts shifted their target to Bufong and the others. Boom, boom, boom. Streaks of nether energy soared into the sky, shooting straight into the horizon. Xiao Bai, I'll leave it to you. Don't strip, just kill. Bufong patted Xiao Bai's belly. As soon as he said that, Xiao Bai's eyes turned scarlet. It was as if he had changed mode. Swish! The metal wings on Xiao Bai's back flapped, and he suddenly shot out. The war god stick in his hand spun unceasingly, swinging like a big windmill. A strong gust of wind blew over. On the opposite side, the nether prison experts' battle cries shook the sky. Streams of nether energy fell, but they were all blown back by Xiao Bai's windmill. As he swung the stick, Xiao Bai fell into the dense nether prison army. A massacre had begun. The war god's stick swung. Miserable screams arose. One by one, the nether prison experts were smashed, flying backward, vomiting blood. Bufong was neither fast nor slow, leisurely strolling toward the Zolords. Shortly, he came to the side of the Zolords. The Zolords had long lost consciousness. Blood dripped from his mouth and nose. Bufong sighed. His hand flipped. Immediately, a crystal fruit of life appeared in his palm. He shoved it into the Zolord's mouth. The latter's injuries healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. This guy has an accomplice. Why are you still resisting? The Heaven Chief Realm is declining, and none of you can save it. Be obedient and die. A voice rang out not far from Bufong. Then, two half-step saints looked playfully at Bufong, their eyes full of ridicule. They had come to deal with Realm Lord Dit, but Dit had broken through to the little saint realm and was fighting with the giant devil, so they had nothing to do. Now that someone had come to die, they were ready to exercise their muscles. The Heaven Immortal puppet in the distance had also been dealt with by a half-step saint. They wanted to completely obliterate all the hope of the Heaven Chief Realm. They could see Bufong's cultivation base. 9-star True Immortal Realm was not bad, but they were half-step saints. 9-star True Immortals were nothing in their eyes. He didn't wait for Bufong's reply. Boom! 2 explosions rang out. The 2 half-step saints attacked immediately. In just a flash, they turned into black beams of light and appeared in front of Bufong. Their killing intent surged, and terrible nether energy swirled and swept around them. As half-step saints, their attacks seemed to contain the will of the Great Path, which was extremely terrifying. Their eyes were cold, and their killing intent was monstrous. They both raised their pitch-black knives, which had the nether prison's will of the Great Path. With supreme power, they slashed down at Bu Fong's head. They wanted to kill Bu Fong with one knife. Chapter 1167. After swallowing a crystal fruit of life, the Zhou Lords regained consciousness, and life essence seemed to surge in his belly. The Zhou Lords, who was on the verge of death, became much more energetic. The crystal fruit of life was the companion of the source of the spring of life. It contained extremely powerful life force and was a pseudo-sacred grade immortal ingredient. Naturally, its effect was good, and it could be considered a real treasure of heaven and earth. He opened his eyes and saw Bu Fong at his side. The Zhou Lords had a complicated look on his face. He never thought that Bu Fong would come to save him. At first, he didn't like this little chef. Be careful. City Lord Zhou's face immediately turned pale when he saw the two half-step saint experts charging at him. He hurriedly shouted. He wanted to warn Bu Fong. A half-step saint. Even he couldn't fight back. Don't worry. Bu Fong glanced at the Zhou Lords and said indifferently. The next moment, he turned to look at the two half-step saints in the distance. The aura of half-step saints was very strong. The long knives in their hands slashed out pitch-black knife energy. The knife energy tore through the sky as if to cut everything into pieces. It was aimed at Bu Fong's head. They wanted to kill Bu Fong. The might emitted by the attacks of two half-step saints caused the body of City Lord Zhou, who had just regained some color, to tremble. A half-step saint was the prelude to becoming a little saint who could already control the will of the Great Path. The will of the Great Path was a mysterious thing. If one could control it, one's fighting prowess could be raised to another level. Half-step saints were only slightly stronger 9-star true immortals, but they were strong because they could control some of the will of the Great Path. They could use the will of the Great Path to exert more power. The principle was similar to that of Bu Fong's exploding meatballs and perishing pot. However, although they could borrow very little of the will of the Great Path, it was very pure. Bu Fong's expression didn't change. His vermilion robe fluttered on his body. The razor-sharp blade aura swept over him, as if it wanted to cut his skin into pieces. Now that Bu Fong's cultivation had broken through to 9-star real God realm, his mental strength had risen to a terrifying level. Although he had yet to reach the Little Saint realm, he was only a step away from entering the Little Saint realm. Compared to ordinary half-saints, his mental energy was much stronger. Little Saint was a huge dividing line. Once one became a Little Saint, one would truly be considered a top-notch existence. Being able to control the will of the heavenly way was an extremely powerful technique. Bu Fong had always given people the impression of an elegant and calm chef. But this time, Bu Fong intended to go crazy. He watched as the Zhou Lords fought against 10,000 enemies alone. Even though their vital energy was depleted, they still fought with all their might. Bu Fong could not help but feel his blood boiling. The dragon bone kitchen knife appeared in his hand. Bu Fong's eyes focused. Facing the two incoming blade auras, Bu Fong's eyes became extremely sharp. He opened his mouth, and a mass of white flame spurted out. He dragged it in his hand. It emitted a white flame, which instantly turned into a sea of fire. The dragon bone kitchen knife tore it apart. A majestic figure emerged behind him, holding a kitchen knife and slashing it down. The blade aura slashed down, colliding with the attacks of the two half-saints. A terrifying explosion erupted. The two half-step saints stood still. Bu Fong's figure shot out explosively, smashing into the ground in the distance, leaving a deep ditch behind him. Bu Fong lifted his head, his eyes somewhat serious. The power of a half-saint was much stronger than that of a 9-star true immortal realm expert. However, it wasn't that Bu Fong didn't have any confidence. He wasn't a person who was used to being beaten. As soon as he stepped on the ground cracked. Bu Fong's figure shot out, turning into a blur as he sped away. In the blink of an eye, he appeared in front of the two half-saints. Bu Fong's hair fluttered in the strong wind. It was a slash, cutting immortal, He used the ultimate knife technique. It was as if it came from beyond the heavens, reaching them in a flash. Boom! This terrifying slash had the attack power of a half-saint. The two half-saints couldn't help but be shocked, and they tried to resist. This time, the three of them were locked in a fierce battle. Both of them were sent flying backward. The half-saints sucked in a cold breath. They didn't expect the chef from the Heaven Chief realm to be so monstrous. He could suppress the two half-saints with the strength of a 9-star, true, immortal realm expert. This was something that only the top geniuses of their clans could do. They couldn't believe that this chef from the Heaven Chief realm also had the talent and strength of a top genius. The two half-saints looked at each other and saw the fear in each other's eyes. We must kill him. If we allow this genius to grow, he will be a disaster. The two half-saints made up their minds in an instant. The next moment, they raised their long knives, and the pitch-black nether energy turned into terrible waves. Above their heads, the will of the Great Path was rolling. They were triggering the nether prison's will of the Great Path. Bufong's heart skipped a beat. He felt as if a pair of eyes were staring at him from above, giving him goosebumps. Was this the nether prison's will of the Great Path? Since it was the will of the Great Path, naturally, they would need to use the will of the Great Path to fight against it. Bufong looked at the two half-saints and roared. Their voices soared into the sky, and their auras seemed to blend together. The rumbling sound was extremely loud. The will of the Great Path they released seemed to merge together. Finally, it turned into a knife light. It was translucent, and vaguely, the void was cut and shattered, with spatial cracks bursting out in all directions. Its power was terrifying. It was as if he was going to cut the whole immortal cooking realm in half. Bufong breathed a sigh of relief. He focused his eyes. The next moment, the scriptures in his spirit sea burst into bright light. Each of them seemed to come to life and kept jumping in the void. Then, Bufong's spirit sea surged with great waves. The waves soared into the sky. Dragon roars, tiger roars, bird cries, turtle roars. The artifact spirits of the god of cooking sets also unleashed their auras. They pushed Bufong's mental force to an even more terrifying level. At this level, he had almost stepped into the realm of the little saint. For a long time, Bufong's mental force had been ahead of his true energy cultivation base. Perhaps because the shackles of the little saint were too great, Bufong's mental force was not much ahead of his true energy cultivation base. However, when Bufong exerted his mental force with all his strength, it was still extremely terrifying. Boom! There seemed to be a beam of light rising from Bufong's body. It was a beam of light condensed by his mental force. In the distance, Realm Lord Dit, who was fighting the giant devil, couldn't help but shrink his eyes. He turned his head to look. He happened to see the scene where Bufong's terrifying aura burst out. He was bewildered for a moment. Then he was overjoyed. Bufong, he's back. He brought the spring of life back. Realm Lord Dit's face instantly showed joy and excitement. The giant devil also sensed Bufong's mental force. However, he didn't care about it at all. Bufong wasn't even a little saint. How could he be interested? He punched out. The pitch-black nether energy seemed to turn into many long snakes sticking out their tongues, coiling toward Realm Lord Dit. It wanted to devour Realm Lord Dit completely. Bufong's hair stood up because of the waves caused by the mental force, which kept blowing at his hair. At this moment, his divine perception burst out. Bufong flipped his hand, and one golden beam of light after another emerged. Two half-step saints weren't worth his perishing pot. The perishing pot was too terrifying. Bufong could only use it once. Once he used it, he would be weak for a long time. Facing two half-step saints, one bursting meatball was enough. If one wasn't enough, he would use two. No matter what, he had to smash them to death. Buzz 1, 2, 3 Bufong made up his mind. About 14 bursting meatballs emerged. They turned into a golden ring of light, spinning around his body. Controlling 14 bursting meatballs at the same time was Bufong's current limit, and it was even after he used his mental force. In the distance, The two little saints also felt a chill in their hearts. However, they didn't flinch. The blade, which had fused their great path's will, slashed down. Before the blade arrived, the blade energy arrived. Even the ground had been cut into pieces. Die! An evildoer like Bu Fong had to be killed. Otherwise, he would become an endless source of trouble in the future. Bu Fong hovered in midair, his scarlet vermilion robe fluttering. The flaming wings on his back flashed, sending fiery feathers flying. Bu Fong raised his hand. The bursting meatballs hovering around him were flicked out by his fingers. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. The 14 explosive pissing meatballs seemed to have turned into a straight line and shot out in an instant. They exploded toward the terrifying blade energy. Little Hu, who was lying on Bu Fong's shoulder, narrowed his eyes, covered his ears, and curled up his foxtail. Boom! A violent explosion, accompanied by dazzling golden light and terrifying energy ripples, spread out. Waves of air swirled. Countless experts who were fighting in the surroundings were sent flying away by the waves of air. One figure after another was sent flying and fell in the distance, looking dumbfounded. When they saw the terrible explosion caused by the collision, they couldn't help but suck in their breaths. Zolords was dumbfounded. His heart seemed to be clutched by a big hand. At this moment, Bu Fong, who was hovering in front of him, seemed to have turned into a heaven god, becoming so dazzling. He's too strong. How did this little chef become so strong? The two half-step saints felt a chill run down their spines. That was an attack fused with the will of the Great Path. How could it be so easily blocked by this guy? Were those exploding meatballs? How could meatballs have such power? 6 more, Bu Fong murmured, his arms hanging by his waist. His eyes seemed to be shining brightly. The next moment, the storm dissipated. The sound of something tearing through the air rang out. In the center of the terrible explosion, streams of golden light rushed out of the smoke and dust. How is that possible? The two half-step saints were shrouded in a chill, feeling incredulous. Swoosh! The streams of golden light arrived in a flash. Their eyes widened as they looked at the explosive meatballs hovering next to them. Their faces changed dramatically. Damn it! The two half-step saints roared. They were about to flee. However, as soon as the thought appeared in their minds, the remaining 6 explosive meatballs exploded. They had unleashed their killer moves at this time. They had just used their old strength, but had not yet recovered their new strength. They couldn't resist the explosion at all. The two half-step saints were engulfed by the flames in an instant. Their bodies seemed to be twisted. They turned into cannonballs and shot backward, looking very disheveled. Bu Fong took a deep breath. With a thought, the black turtle constellation Wok appeared in his hand. Holding the black turtle constellation Wok in one hand, Bu Fong stepped on the void, and the void seemed to explode. His whole body turned into a stream of light and shot out in an arc. The two half-step saints smashed into the ground and created a huge crater. They coughed up blood, their eyes dull. Suddenly, Bu Fong descended from the sky with the black wok. The black wok grew larger and larger in their eyes. Boom! As the wok smashed down, the head of one of the half-step saints sank deep into the ground. The ground exploded again, and a deep depression appeared once more. The other half-step saint was trembling with fear. Bu Fong slowly turned his head and glanced expressionlessly at the frightened half-step saint. Don't worry, everyone has a share. Bam! As soon as he finished speaking, he waved the black turtle constellation wok, drew an arc in the air, and smashed it hard on the half-step saint's head. With a bang, blood spurted out from his mouth and nose, and the attendant was sent flying into the distance. Bu Fong walked up to him. He held the black turtle constellation wok with one hand. It hung over the latter's head, then loosened. The black turtle constellation wok, which weighed more than 10,000 kilograms, fell with a rumble. The half-step saint's head also caved in. He had killed 2 half-step saints with one wok. The surrounding nether prison experts all felt a chill run down their spines. In the distance, Zolords was dumbfounded. He looked at Bu Fong's black turtle constellation wok, then at the black wok in his own hand. They were both walk, but why was there such a huge difference? Two half-step saints had fallen. This also attracted the attention of the giant devil in the distance. He didn't expect that there was another existence in the Heaven Chief realm who could kill half-step saints besides the realm lord. He turned his eyes and fixed them on Bufong, who was clad in a scarlet vermilion robe that fluttered in the wind. Bufong held the wok and looked indifferently at the giant devil. The giant devil's pupils constricted. That familiar feeling, roar. It's you. It's you who hurt my arm. Die. The giant devil roared. He smashed his fists hard on the ground, sending out a terrible blast. Realm Lord Dit was knocked flying backward. His roar turned into a terrible cannonball, shooting toward Bufong. Chapter 1168. Stepping on Xiaopi, Xiaobai shot out like a lightning bolt, dashing toward the crowd. Holding the war god's stick with one hand, lightning arcs moved on the surface of the stick. Soon, they went up the stick to his arm. Xiaobai's body condensed a thick, murderous aura. His eyes turned scarlet, as if there were flames burning in them. It was very terrifying, like a volcano erupting, sparks falling from the sky. In an instant, Xiaobai smashed into the crowd. A group of nether prison experts roared, attacking Xiaobai. All kinds of nether energy condensed into energy attacks, attacking Xiaobai as if they wanted to smash him into pieces in an instant. This was a puppet. However, no one dared to look down on any puppet. Nether Prison had 9 great clans. There was the Giant Demon Clan, the 9 Revolution Nether Chef Clan, the Sword Demon Clan, and so on. Among them, there was also a clan that specialized in puppets. Their puppets were called Nether Puppeteers. The members of this clan were called Nether Puppeteers. They were good at using all kinds of heavenly ingredients and earthly treasures to make puppets. There were even some who took the unorthodox path, digging out the tombs of ancient experts and digging out their corpses to make nether puppets. According to their secret technique, the older the corpse, the stronger the nether puppeteers would be. There was a period of time when the nether puppeteers dominated the nether prison. Hence, no nether prison expert would look down on any puppet, even if it wasn't a nether puppet. Of course, whether they looked down on it or not, it didn't make any difference to Xiaobai. What Xiaobai wanted to do was to kill. Because Bufong had said, this time, he wouldn't strip people's clothes, only kill. His scarlet eyes were like those of a wild beast. He waved the war god stick, creating thousands of stick shadows. Each shadow was wrapped with terrifying lightning. Boom! Boom! The weaker nether prison experts were directly swept by the stick, and their bodies exploded. Only 9-star true immortal realm experts could resist a few sticks. Xiaobai's improvement this time was huge. Of course, because Bufong's cultivation had improved, Xiaobai's combat power had also skyrocketed. As Bufong's strength grew, the relationship between Xiaobai's battle prowess and Bufong's cultivation became more and more blurred. However, the improvement of Bufong's strength would still subtly enhance Xiaobai's battle prowess. This was a faintly discernible and mysterious relationship. The war god's stick smashed on the ground. He bent it suddenly. Then, Xiaobai's body shot out like a cannonball, turning into a shooting star. It came crashing down. His fan-like palm suddenly changed. In the next moment, it turned into a huge cannon barrel. Terrifying energy condensed in the cannon barrel. Lightning arcs scuttled about, and the azure radiance was dazzling and eye-catching. Then with a bang it shot out. Lightning arcs shot out and smashed down with a sizzling sound. Several nether prison experts were blasted into pieces. Xiaobai, who had activated his killing mode, was like a demon walking out of the abyss. Evil creature. A loud roar rang out. A half-step saint stepped on the ground, arriving in a flash. A powerful punch smashed toward Xiaobai. Xiaobai held the war god's stick with one hand, twirled it, and pointed it toward the sky. Boom! The half-step saint's punch collided with Xiaobai, instantly causing a shockwave. In the distance, the nether prison experts crazily rushed over. Xiaobai's mechanical eyes flashed. The metal wings on his back flapped. Instantly, Tens of thousands of swords shot out from the metal wings. With a tearing sound, they flew everywhere, constantly tearing the bodies of the nether prison experts. Puffing sounds rang out incessantly. Blood mist burst from the chests of the nether prison experts one after another. The current Xiao Bai was a great killing machine. He swung the war god stick. He shot out and charged towards a crowd that was pouncing towards him. Meanwhile, Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes focused. He raised his huge fist and smashed it toward the half-step saint. A man and a puppet fought fiercely in midair. It was an undisguised melee. Unlike Bu Feng's attack, Xiao Bai and the nether prison half-step saint both chose close-range attacks instead of long-range bombardments. Unlike Bu Feng, who could throw a few beef meatballs from a distance and blow the enemy to death, Xiao Bai was very agile. Whitey was very agile. Although it looked bloated, it was not weaker than the nether prison half-step saint in a fight. The fists collided with the surfaces of the fists. The half-step saint's pupils constricted. With a long roar, his chi and blood surged like thunder and waves. Boom! The man and the puppet exchanged several punches in a row, causing the ground to explode. Xiao Bai took a step back, and the ground caved in. The half-step saint also rolled over and landed on the ground. The next moment, he leaped up again like a dragon and charged toward Xiao Bai. His leg swept out, and it seemed as if it could collapse mountains and rivers. This leg contained terrifying nether energy, causing it to seem as if it had turned into a sharp blade. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes buzzed, and his arm spun. Then, it turned into a chopper. The chopper slashed up and collided with the half-step saint's leg. Sparks flew in all directions, and a deafening clang rang out. Clang! 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 Xiao Bai's slash was so fast that it was almost impossible to see the shadow of the knife. On the other hand, the half-step saint, who was obviously very good at melee combat, was not weaker than Xiao Bai. The two were locked in a fierce battle. After the chopper came the bombardment of fists. Elbows, fists, whipping legs, all kinds of melee combat methods were used. Boom! The half-step saint's elbow smashed hard on Xiao Bai's chest, crushing Xiao Bai and throwing him to the ground like a cannonball. The surrounding nether prison experts all cheered. The half-step saint stood proudly in the sky, grinning and panting violently. His hair stuck in the void like steel needles. All of a sudden, Xiao Bai leaped up from the rubble. He suddenly appeared in front of the half-saint, and then his huge hands wrapped around the half-saint's head. Then, he raised his knee and made an intimate contact with the half-step saint's face. There seemed to be a sound of bones breaking. The half-step saint's blood spilled into the sky as he howled miserably. His miserable voice made many people's scalps go numb. Boom! Boom! The half-step saint waved his fists furiously. His punches seemed to send out blasts in the void as they kept hitting Xiao Bai's body. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes remained unchanged. The knee kept hitting the half-step saint's face until it was crooked. He grabbed the half-step saint's head with one hand. Whitey grabbed the ladder and flung him to the ground. With a bang, the ground caved in. The half-step saint coughed up blood, and his eyes showed a fierce look. He had wanted to fight hand-to-hand, but he didn't expect that he would be almost killed by this puppet. He wiped his bloodied face. The half-step saint's eyes became very ferocious. He jerked his hands. In the next moment, numerous sharp daggers appeared around him. You forced me to do this. I'm going to tear this thing of yours apart. The half-step saint roared. Then, one dagger after another shot out. They seemed to turn into long dragons, spiraling up into the sky and instantly surrounding Xiao Bai. Xiao Bai's eyes froze. The next moment, the scarlet in his eyes became even more intense. At the same time, many small holes opened on his back. All of a sudden, sparks burst out of the holes. Swish, white leap. Xiao Bai's mechanical voice rang out. The next moment, he charged forward, drawing an arc in the air and heading toward the half-step saint. The moment Xiao Bai shot out, everything around him seemed to become still. He jumped as if he had teleported. Boom! Numerous daggers transformed into a long dragon that charged forward, but all of them missed their target. The half-step saint's eyes shrank. The next moment, he sucked in a breath of cold air. He found that the puppet was in front of him, less than an inch away from him. Boom! The fan-like palm suddenly rose and hit the half-step saint's chin. The half-step saint's pupils shrank, and his body was uncontrollably sent flying up into the sky. A loud boom rang out. Blue sparks shot out of the holes on Xiao Bai's back, producing a huge force that rippled the ground. The next moment, Xiao Bai was flying parallel to the half-step saint. The half-step saint turned his head with difficulty. Through his blood-covered eyes, he saw Xiao Bai's mechanical gaze. Xiao Bai raised his hand and slapped him. Boom! The half-step saint was sent flying. Xiao Bai jumped again, appearing at the place where the half-step saint was sent flying, and threw another punch. The half-step saint flew backward again, but Xiao Bai jumped again, sending him flying back. The half-step saint was extremely aggrieved. He didn't even have the chance to use the power to control the will of the Great Path, and he was being abused by a puppet. This puppet, it was too violent. All the bones in his body felt like they were about to shatter, and his body was covered in cracks. The half-step saint was already dumbfounded. Blood sprayed in the sky. After a fierce beating and continuous jumping, the blue sparks on Xiao Bai's back dimmed, losing their power. Xiao Bai stretched out his fan-like palms and grabbed the half-step saint's arms. Then, he jumped up and stepped on the half-step saint's back as if he was stepping on a shrimp. He pressed his palm on the half-step saint's head. Then, he flew toward the ground like a shooting star. The half-step saint opened his eyes with difficulty and looked at the ground that was getting bigger and bigger. His body and mind were enveloped by a chill. No, no! A miserable howl rang out. Xiao Bai stepped on the half-step saint and smashed him deep into the ground. Boom! It was like a cannonball crashing down. The entire ground exploded. Sand flew everywhere, and the rate at which the fissures accelerated. Gravel rose into the air. Smoke and dust billowed. Everyone was silent. Rumble. Gravel rolled down. Amidst the smoke and dust, a chubby figure slowly walked out. He raised his hand, and a suction force burst out. In the distance, the war god's stick seemed to turn into a thunderbolt, flying over. Xiao Bai held in his hand, both ends of the stick still shaking. The nether prison experts sucked in a cold breath, chills filling their bodies. On the other side, Bu Fong also withdrew his gaze. After this evolution, Xiao Bai didn't disappoint him. He had become much stronger. Roar! His mind returned. Bu Fong's eyes turned to the giant devil in the distance. He didn't know when the giant devil had shifted his target to him. A roar rang out, and a cannonball condensed from monstrous nether energy with a terrible aura shot toward him. This giant devil was a little saint. Although in Bu Fong's perception, this giant demon's aura was much weaker than the City Lord of Goddess City or the nether prison sword demon he met on God Vanishing Mountain. It was even weaker than the six-tailed fox and the nine-tailed fox. This giant devil must have just entered the little saint realm. However, even if he had just become a little saint, he was still a little saint. The threat of explosive meatballs to the little saint was basically negligible. The only thing that could threaten the little saint was probably the perishing pot. He watched as the nether chi cannonballs bombarded him. As the gale approached, it caused his clothes to flutter violently. Bu Fong narrowed his eyes and raised his hand. In his hand, a ball of white flame was burning quietly. Bu Fong's divine perception spread out in an instant. The flames suddenly soared into the sky. Bu Fong's spiritual force surged, and terror spread. This caused the white flames to turn into a huge fire net. That fire net blocked in front of Bu Fong, trying to block the nether energy cannonball. Boom! The nether energy cannonball came crushing over. It bombarded the fire net. The fire net was instantly suppressed, and a deep dent was formed. Sizzle! The nether energy cannonball kept spinning in the fire net, and its power didn't dissipate as it rushed toward Bu Fong. However, when it was 1 meter away from Bu Fong, it was blocked by the fire net. The spinning also gradually disappeared. Bu Fong raised his hand. His palm pressed on the fire net. Then, a terrible force suddenly burst out from his palm. Boom! A loud explosion rang out. The nether energy cannonball in the fire net was instantly slapped back by Bu Fong's palm. The moment the cannonball flew back, Bu Fong's figure shot through the fire net like an arrow. Little Hu, who was lying on Bu Fong's shoulder, was held in Bu Fong's arms. He aimed his mouth at the huge, giant devil behind the cannonball. Bu Fong's next plan, to bombard the little saint. Chapter 1169. Is this guy crazy? On the 5th floor of Heaven Chief Realm, Bu Fong's appearance attracted everyone's attention. He used a fire net to deflect the little saint's attack. Then, he dashed towards the little saint's location without flinching. What was he going to do? Was he going to fight with the little saint? But Bu Fong was just a 9-star true immortal realm expert. Realm Lord Dit was shocked by Bu Fong's thunderous moves. However, the moment Bu Fong dashed out, he came to his senses. He hurriedly opened his mouth to warn Bu Fong. He didn't want Bu Fong to be smashed to death by the giant devil's fist. That was a little saint. Under normal circumstances, it should be a 1-revolution little saint. The little saint was divided into 9 revolutions. The difference between each revolution was huge. That was the difference in controlling the will of the heavenly way. However, even if the giant devil in front of him was just a 1-revolution little saint, it wasn't something that Bu Fong could deal with. The decline of the Heaven Chief Realm had caused all the resources of the Heaven Chief Realm to be plundered by the Heaven Tree. However, it still couldn't stop the Heaven Tree from withering. Realm Lord Dit originally had the chance to break through to the little saint. However, because of the lack of resources, he couldn't break through. Now, he had no choice but to break through. However, this had also accelerated the collapse of the Heaven Tree. If Bu Fong had come back a little later, the entire Heaven Chief Realm would have collapsed. Realm Lord Dit's body emitted golden light. His figure flashed, wanting to help Bu Fong. However, just as he moved, the giant devil's fist suddenly moved horizontally, smashing towards him. Realm Lord Dit didn't expect that. He hurriedly urged his immortal energy to resist. Bang! His entire body was sent flying like a cannonball, crashing into the distance and creating a huge crater in the ground. Bu Fong glanced at Realm Lord Dit, who was sent flying, and let out a sigh of relief. With a flap of the flaming wings on his back, he dashed forward once more, closing in on the giant demon in an instant. The giant demon was truly enormous. It was like a mountain that was hundreds of feet tall. He opened his mouth and let out a wild roar, as if he was going to set off a gale. Boom! The giant devil waved his hand, slapping away the terrifying cannonball that Bu Fong had rebounded. Although he had fired the cannonball himself, it posed no threat to him. It was you, human, who blew up my arm. You must die. When the giant demon sensed the familiar aura on Bu Fong's body, he was instantly enraged. Hot air even gushed out of his nostrils. Waving his giant palm, he swatted at Bu Fong in the sky. He wanted to slap Bu Fong to death with just one slap. Bu Fong hovered in the sky. He held little Hu in his arms. This little fellow had been burping nonstop. It was obvious that Bu Fong had fed her too much. Bu Fong rubbed little Hu's head, his eyes focused. He wasn't afraid of the giant devil's pressure. With the system, Bu Fong wasn't afraid of the so-called pressure at all. His figure flashed. A moment later, he disappeared from his spot. He dodged the giant devil's slap. Little Hu, it's up to you now. Fire. Little Hu was the gift that Bu Fong had prepared for the giant devil. Little Hu couldn't wait any longer. After burping, she opened her mouth. Her foxtail kept wagging. Then, a golden light gathered in her mouth. Boom! A loud sound rang out. The golden light shot out like a shooting star, dragging a golden tail behind it. In an instant, it sped over and hit the giant devil's arm. Boom! An explosion rang out. The giant devil's arm was blown up, and sparks flew everywhere. A big hole was blasted open. A piece of his green skin was gone. Bu Fong's eyes lit up. This giant devil's cultivation base was much weaker than the little saint of the Sword Demon clan he had met in God Vanishing Mountain. At least, in terms of defense, they weren't on the same level. Boom! 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 Once Little Who started firing, she couldn't stop. Golden flames kept surging in her mouth. Golden cannonballs shot out of her mouth, dragging golden tails behind them as they bombarded the giant devil's body. Boom! Boom! Explosions rang out. The giant devil howled miserably. One energy cannon couldn't hurt him, but a barrage of energy cannons was enough to blast his body full of holes. After all, he was just a little saint. His fleshly body hadn't been cultivated to an invincible level. The giant devil kept retreating, raising his hands to cover his body. However, the cannonballs kept falling, smashing the giant devil's flesh and blood. Green blood splattered everywhere. Didn't you want to kill me? Come on. Bufang held Little Who in his arms, speaking calmly. The giant devil's huge body kept retreating under the bombardment. Everyone was dumbfounded, and their faces were filled with disbelief. In the ruins, Realm Lord Dit got up. Looking at everything in the distance, he sucked in a cold breath. How is this possible? Realm Lord Dit murmured in disbelief. One should know that he was a little saint. Bufang was actually suppressing a little saint. What was that thing in his hand? It looked like a fox that could spit fire. Boom, boom, boom. The sound of explosions rang out unceasingly. The originally violent giant devil was beaten until he was squatting on the ground. Bursting meatballs kept hitting his body. Even a little saint couldn't bear it. The giant devil felt a little sullen. He didn't expect to be suppressed by a 9-star, true immortal realm expert. He had almost lost his face as a little saint. His eyes focused. The giant devil punched the ground with both fists. He got up, opened his mouth, and roared at the sky. Roar! The roar was deafening, and waves of air surged. The giant devil leaped up high, and its huge palm slapped toward Bufang's figure. You can still resist. Bufang's eyes focused, furrowing his brows. A moment later, he rubbed Little Who's head and said, "Little Who, fire faster." Little Who's eyes lit up. Then, duh, 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 duh. His head moved up and down faster and faster, spitting out tongues of fire. Streaks of golden light filled the sky and smashed down with a loud rumble. In just a moment, the giant devil was completely covered. The entire 5th layer of the Heaven Chief realm seemed to be shrouded in a violent explosion, shaking unceasingly. The ground was constantly collapsing. Flames rushed to the sky, and a mushroom cloud rose. Whoosh, after a long time, Little Who no longer spat out fire snakes. He opened his mouth, burping. Green smoke curled up and down. Little Who nodded his head, looking a little confused. His eyes were full of circles. Bufang raised the corner of his mouth, stroking Little Who's soft hair, then put the latter on his shoulder. He knew that the bursting meatballs Little Who had eaten should be almost gone. Looking at the distant flames that blotted out the sky, Bufang's face was incomparably cold. Hovering in the void, the shock wave rushed over, blowing his hair and causing it to flutter in the wind. The Nether Prison experts' jaws dropped. They were so shocked that their jaws were about to drop. A little saint was killed, just like that. Realm Lord didn't know what to say. This kid Bufang, where did he find such a fox? Zo Lords raised his hand, pinching his face, then excitedly waved his thumb and middle finger. Could it be that the Nether Prison's invasion was repelled, just like that? Of course, Bufang wasn't as optimistic as them. After all, he was a little saint. How could he be killed so easily? Roar. Indeed, a roar rang out from the mushroom cloud. That giant devil's figure suddenly rose, jumping out of the flames. Waving his fist, he smashed toward Bufang's position. His eyes were scarlet, full of murderous intent. Damn human! The giant devil roared unceasingly, his anger burning. Both his arms were exposed, revealing the bones. Almost all of them were blown up. This time, the giant devil was in a more miserable state. Hence, he was even more furious. Sure enough, he's not dead. Bufang's eyes narrowed. He seemed to have expected this. His mind flickered. Xiaopi turned into a golden beam of light, shooting over. Bufang stepped on Xiaopi, flying backward. The giant devil's fist smashed the ground. With a boom, the ground collapsed. The entire fifth floor of Heaven Chief realm finally fell. It hit the fourth layer of the Heaven Chief realm, as if the sky was falling and the earth was sinking. The ground of the fourth layer couldn't bear the heavy impact. Creaking sounds rang out, and many places cracked. The experts of the fifth floor of Heaven Chief realm rose into the sky, unable to stand steadily. The giant devil's eyes were scarlet. No one knew when, but a giant black spear had appeared in his hand. Grabbing the huge spear with his bare arms, the giant devil strode forward, chasing after Bufong. Now, only Bufong was left in his eyes. He just wanted to slap the guy who hurt him to death. Swish! The giant devil swung the spear. The void seemed to be pierced. A terrible whistling sound came. Xiaopi, carrying Bufong, swooped up. The spear brushed past Xiaopi's body and fell to the ground. Bufong's eyes narrowed. A moment later, he gently exhaled. With Xiaopi here, he wasn't worried that the giant devil would catch up with him. He sat down cross-legged. Bufong closed his eyes. After a while, he suddenly opened them. A sharp glint flashed across his eyes. Little Hu, who was lying on Bufong's shoulder, stuck out her tongue. Her eyes lit up, and she straightened her head, looking more spirited. Her fox nose twitched, and her eyes were a little blurred. In Bufong's hand, a silvery white lotus pot appeared in front of him. Perishing pot, it appeared. Buzz, the perishing pot floated in Bufong's hand, and a white flame burned under it. Inside the pot, sizzling sounds rang out incessantly. The cabbages inside were rolling, and a rich aroma filled the air. Bufong wasn't in a hurry to throw the pot out. The perishing pot needed to be preheated, and when it was preheated to the extreme, it would be at its strongest. As time went by, the perishing pot was boiling. The soup in the pot was boiling, and the dish was emitting hot steam and a strong aroma. Little Hu craned her head and opened her mouth, which was full of saliva. It was as if she wanted to bury her whole head in the pot. However, Bufong grabbed her head with one hand. "You're too young to eat it." Bufong was seriously exhorting them. Foxy, on the other hand, felt that it was a pity. Her small eyes were filled with a pitiful look, and there seemed to be tears flowing in them. However, she was ignored by Bufong. He didn't let Little Hu eat it because he was protecting her. Her body couldn't bear the power of the perishing pot. A beam of golden light flashed through the void. The giant devil chased after it and sped through the entire fifth layer, causing it to shake constantly. Realm Lord Dit watched from a distance, as if he was watching a farce. The surrounding nether prison experts were also a little confused. Buzz, the perishing pot in Bufong's hand, seemed to be shaking, and an invisible wave spread out, causing Bufong's mind to tremble. This was the first time Bufong had used the perishing pot to its full power. The previous 2 times, he didn't use it completely because he had scruples. However, its power was already very terrifying. This time, he planned to use the perishing pot without holding anything back. His spirit sea was boiling. The artifact spirits of the 4 god of cooking sets roared at the same time, pushing Bufong's mental force to its peak. With the release of his divine perception, the mental force around Bufong became as viscous as an ocean. Swoosh! Bufong's eyes lit up. He raised his hand, and the perishing pot floated in the air. Bufong's divine perception was absorbed by the perishing pot like a whale. All of a sudden, the silver perishing pot turned into a blazing white color, shining as brightly as the sun. A terrible wave spread out from it, causing Bufong's mind to tremble slightly. Rumble! The giant demon's wildly running figure came to an abrupt halt. His eyes widened. In the distance, Xiaopi stopped running and hovered in place. Bufong, on the other hand, held the perishing pot with one hand, which was as dazzling as the sun. Everyone's eyes seemed to be attracted by the perishing pot in Bufong's hand. The giant devil's pupils constricted. The next moment, a chill enveloped him. That familiar recipe, that familiar smell. Yes, it was that terrible dish full of death and destruction. "Sure enough, it's you." He would never forget that disastrous scene last time. The heart-wrenching pain was like a humiliation that he couldn't forget. Grabbing the giant spear, the giant devil threw his head back and let out a long roar that seemed to disperse the clouds. The next moment, he held the spear, ran a little, rushed forward, and swung it. The spear turned into a pitch-black lightning bolt and shot toward the perishing pot. "Go to hell. I won't fall into the same trap twice." The giant devil roared, his eyes filled with violence. Everyone sucked in a cold breath. Standing on Xiaopi's back, Bufang's face was slightly pale. His divine perception was almost exhausted, which pushed the perishing pot's power to the extreme. The incandescent light was as dazzling as the sun. The aura of destruction in it made Bufang's heart tremble. He loosened his grip, and the perishing pot floated in the air. He took a deep breath and used his last wisp of divine perception to lock onto the giant devil's figure. Then, he flicked his finger. Buzz, buzz, a muffled sound rang out as his finger touched the perishing pot. Under everyone's gaze, the perishing pot tore through the sky like the sun and shot toward the giant devil. In the sky, the giant devil's spear and the perishing pot approached at high speed. Finally, they collided. Chapter 1170. Few people had seen the horror of the perishing pot. When Bufang first made this thing, no one thought that it could have unparalleled destructive power. However, when the dried pot was thrown into the bronze door and caused a terrifying explosion, the crowd was stunned. Only when the arm of the little saint from the giant devil clan was blown to the point that even the bones were exposed did the crowd realize the horror of the pot. Now, Bufang had once again used the perishing pot, a dish that combined the gourmet array and the will of the Great Path. This time, Bufang had pushed it to the extreme, and the power it unleashed was enough to make people shudder. Sizzle! The perishing pot burst into a dazzling white light like a blazing sun. After being flicked out by Bufang, it shot out like a bolt of white lightning. Wherever it passed, space would constantly collapse, which was sufficient to show how terrifying it was. The giant demon threw out a spear. This black spear was covered with dense lines. This was the giant demon bloodline's most proficient attack method. It was able to ruthlessly nail an enemy to the ground and absorb all of their vitality. It was a great weapon. The giant devil's eyes were bloodshot. He wouldn't fall into the same pit twice. Last time, the perishing pot had blasted him into a bloody mess. This time, he was determined to crush the person who used the perishing pot. He was just that irascible and violent. In the distance, many people's faces turned pale. Realm Lord Dit was even more shocked. He was amazed that Bufang could use such a powerful attack. No ordinary little saint expert could resist the power of the perishing pot. Zolords pinched his thumb and middle finger. All that was left in his eyes was the bright perishing pot. This was the first time he had seen it. Inwardly, he was unexpectedly excited. Bufang Boy killed this green-skinned monster. City Lord Zhou waved his thumb and middle finger and shouted. The surrounding nether prison experts also stopped what they were doing, looking at the location of the explosion. The next moment, everyone's eyes narrowed. The spear covered in black smoke collided with Bufang's perishing pot. Rumble! A deafening explosion resounded through the air. Then, under the horrified gazes of the crowd, the spear was actually blocked. Unable to move forward, the rapidly spinning spear gave off a tearing power, and a large hole appeared in space as cracks spread out. The perishing pot collided with the black spear, but its momentum didn't slow down at all. The incandescent brilliance continued to expand. In the next moment, a huge white lotus spread out, growing bigger and bigger, almost covering the entire horizon. A loud explosion erupted. Devoured by the terrible energy of the perishing pot, the stones on the ground turned into debris and scattered away. After resisting for a long while, the pitch-black spear finally crumbled. It was covered in cracks, which then spread out. With a cracking sound, it completely shattered. The troll's pupils constricted. His hair stood on end, and the hair on his body stood on end. He smashed his fists on the ground and let out a hissing roar. However, that huge, destructive lotus was still expanding. Rumble. The whole fifth layer of the immortal cooking realm was shaking violently. The ground was shaking, and cracks could be seen all over it. Bufong's face was extremely weak, but he calmly looked into the distance. Sitting cross-legged on Xiaopi's back, he looked at the exploding destructive lotus and exhaled softly. Then, he asked Shrimpy to bring him away into the distance. Little Hu Li, lying on Bufong's shoulder, stared dumbfoundedly at the exploding lotus in the distance. She actually wanted to eat this thing. This kind of explosive power was much stronger than the explosive meatball. If Little Hu Li ate it, she might explode. Scared, Little Hu Li shyly raised her tail and wrapped it around her head. She buried her head on Bufong's shoulder and curled up into a ball. She wanted to be alone now. A ripping sound rang out. In a flash, Xiaopi flew away with Bufong, looking into the distance. The destructive lotus kept getting bigger and bigger. It swallowed everything around it and kept rolling around Shrimpy's back. The other experts in the surroundings also recovered from their shock as they looked at the destructive lotus that seemed to want to devour them. Without saying a word, they turned around and left. They fled in panic, but soon found that they couldn't escape at all. The destructive energy of the lotus was expanding too fast. In just a flash, many nether prison experts were devoured by the terrible power of the perishing pot and turned into ashes. The perishing pot was really a great killing tool. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes flashed. With an explosive sound, her body shot into the distance like a cannonball. Her speed was extremely fast. Realm Lord Dit's figure flashed and appeared in front of the Zoolords. He grabbed the latter's shoulder and soared into the sky. The giant devil also wanted to avoid the fluctuation of the destructive lotus. However, Bufong's target was the giant devil. Moreover, his body was so huge that it wasn't easy to dodge. Soon, he found that the destructive lotus was coming at him. The destructive lotus seemed to have turned into a small mountain, blotting out the sky. It was a shocking scene. The giant devil stomped his foot and found that there was no way to avoid it. Roaring, he turned around, swung his fists, and smashed them into the lotus. "Get out of here!" His fists were filled with dense nether energy, and a vague, transparent will seemed to descend above his head. It was the will of the great path that belonged to the nether prison. The nether energy spread and seemed to turn into a huge wall, which tried to stop the perishing pot. Boom! Under everyone's gaze, the perishing pot hit the wall of nether energy. However, the wall of nether energy, which contained the will of the great path, was easily torn apart by the perishing pot. It was torn into pieces. The giant devil's pupil shrank. He watched helplessly as his hands were devoured by the perishing pot. Damn it! The giant devil was shocked and angry. His cultivation base burst out to the fullest, trying to stop the perishing pot. However, crack, as the perishing pot continued to devour his arms, they began to break one after another. Even his bones were broken. This time, it wasn't just his flesh that was destroyed. The perishing pot expanded, and in the end, it completely swallowed the giant devil. Everyone sucked in a cold breath. From a distance, they could see a vague figure inside the perishing pot. The figure was struggling, but he couldn't break free. Stepping on Xiaopi's back, Bufong hovered in the distant sky with his hands clasped behind his back, looking at the huge, perishing pot. His vermilion robe flapped noisily in the wind. Explode. Bufong's eyes were indifferent as he opened his mouth and uttered softly. The next moment, everyone's pupils shrank. Then, they watched helplessly as the perishing pot exploded. Rumble. The whole world seemed to fall silent at this moment. All sounds were devoured. The huge lotus in the distance turned into a towering flame and exploded in an instant. Blasts of air blasted everywhere, lifting up a layer of the ground. A beam of light shot up into the sky from the lotus, twisting and distorting. The arc-shaped energy exploded, sending sand and pebbles flying. After the silence came the clamor. Finally, a terrible explosion rang out, deafening everyone. Everyone stared blankly at the huge mushroom cloud rising into the sky in the distance. This mushroom cloud was much bigger than the one Buffon created when he threw out a dozen bursting meatballs. City Lord Zoe was completely dumbfounded, and his fingers were trembling. This thing was created by that little chef, Buffon? This kind of attack almost destroyed the entire 5th floor of Heaven Chief Realm. Had this little chef really become the real great demon? It's too terrible. It's a real weapon of destruction. Realm Lord did exclaimed in admiration. Blasts of air blasted out, sending countless experts flying away. Many of them fell in the distance, feeling lucky. Some people crawled up from the ground, looking at the scene in horror. Their bodies couldn't help but tremble. The giant devil's struggling figure had already lost its breath, and it didn't dare to move. Even the Heaven Nether Bridge above the Bronze Gate fell silent at this moment. Behind the Bronze Gate, many experts who were watching were terrified, sucking in cold breaths. With this kind of destructive power, it was not hard to imagine that the giant devil was dead. Xiaopi put Buffon on the ground. A hot wind blew over, which seemed to contain the terrible power of the perishing pot. It lasted for about half a day. Only then did the terrifying explosions and rumbles slowly dissipate. Buffon held little Hu in his arms, slowly walking toward the center of the explosion in the distance. After a while, the explosion dissipated, leaving only billowing smoke and dust. Swoosh! Buffon stopped walking. He had come to the center of the perishing pot, and his eyes widened. A huge, bottomless pit emerged, with gray smoke swirling in it. Even though he was standing at the edge of the deep pit, Buffon could still feel the terrifying shockwave of energy sweeping across his face. This kind of power could directly injure an expert who had just entered the true immortal realm. It was indeed worthy of being the perishing pot that had sucked up all of Buffon's divine perception. Its power was comparable to a full blow from the little saint. Even the sword demon, who was at the peak of the little saint, couldn't do more than this. The pit was so huge that it almost covered half of the 5th floor of Heaven Chief Realm. Moreover, it was so deep that one couldn't see the bottom. It seemed that even the sky of the 4th floor of the Heaven Chief Realm had been blown through. Roar! Suddenly, a shrill and furious roar resounded from the deep pit. The sound of bones colliding rang out. Buffon stood by the pit with his hands clasped behind his back. He furrowed his brows. Suddenly, a huge black shadow rushed out of the deep pit filled with gray smoke. There was a loud bang. It leaped toward Buffon. It was a huge skeleton. Without a doubt, this was the skeleton of the little saint giant devil. The little saint's vitality was really tenacious. After suffering such an attack, he didn't die. However, the giant devil, who had turned into a skeleton, was almost burned to ashes. Only his heart was still beating, spurting vitality to maintain the skeleton. Looking at the giant devil skeleton dashing toward him, Buffon's face didn't change. All of a sudden, a clanging sound of metal rang out. Xiao Bai's figure suddenly appeared in front of Buffon. He swung the war god stick. While swinging, the war god stick suddenly enlarged. Finally, with a boom, it hit the skeleton, smashing it into pieces. The giant devil's heart beat vigorously for a while. Then it was smashed by Xiao Bai's stick. Blood filled the sky, falling like a rain of blood. As the blood rained down, the gray smoke also slowly dispersed. Xiao Bai landed, his mechanical eyes twinkling. Holding the war god stick, he stood by Buffon. The huge pit was shocking to the eye. Scattered around the deep pit were nether prison experts. Looking at the giant devil that had been killed, their bodies trembled. A little saint's existence, he had fallen. Rumble. In the gray sky, an invisible wheel of the great path seemed to roll. It seemed to be lamenting the fall of a little saint. Realm Lord Dit deeply exhaled, his tense body suddenly relaxing. A moment later, the golden light shrouding his body vanished. His entire body turned soft as he knelt on the ground on one knee. The side effect of forcibly breaking through to the little saint realm was too big. He was afraid that he would be weak for a long time. Lords hurried to support Realm Lord Dit, their eyes worried. "Help me see Buffon. He has returned. He must have brought the spring of life. Our Heaven Chief Realm is saved." Although Realm Lord Dit was much calmer, his voice couldn't hide the excitement in it. Lords nodded, hurrying to pull Realm Lord Dit toward Buffon. However, they had just taken a few steps. Realm Lord Dit and Lords felt a terrifying aura under their feet, chilling their bodies and hearts. In the distance, the bronze gate. Creaking sounds rang out again. The bronze gate opened, and nether energy spread. Clear footsteps rang out from the gate. The sound resounded through the sky, lingering between heaven and earth. Buffon's pupils constricted, and he jerked his head to look at the bronze gate. There, a figure wrapped in a black robe slowly emerged. He was clad in a black chef robe, and a bright star was embroidered on the sleeve of his robe. A terrifying aura filled the sky, making everyone feel a great pressure. "Well, I can't believe you killed a little saint of the giant devil clan. You're really capable. However, without the terrible destructive means just now, what else do you have to resist the invasion of the 9 Revolution Nether Chef's clan?" His voice grew cold, filled with a murderous aura, echoing through the whole place. Chapter 1171. A cold voice rang out, with a hint of mockery and ridicule. The aura of the figure at the bronze gate was very strong, even stronger than that giant devil. There was no doubt that this guy was also a little saint. He was even stronger than the giant devil who was a first revolution little saint. Tap, 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 another sound of footsteps rang out. At the side of the figure, another existence with a strong aura emerged. He was also wearing a chef robe, and his gray hair fluttered in the air. These two people had the faces of middle-aged men, but their auras were extremely strong. Realm Lord Dit's pupils constricted. A saint of the 9 Revolution Nether Chef's clan? They. Realm Lord Dit was dumbfounded. He never thought that the little saint of the 9 Revolution Nether Chef's clan would appear at this time. Was he here to reap the benefits? Previously, Realm Lord Dit had some doubts because it should be the 9 Revolution Nether Chef's clan who wanted to get the Heaven Tree Seed of the Heaven Chief Realm. However, when the Bronze Gate was opened, it was only the giant devil who attacked the Heaven Chief Realm. "Are you surprised?" The Heaven Chief Little Saint smiled faintly. "After all, it's the Heaven Chief Realm, a realm that used to be no weaker than the Nether Prison. A dying camel is bigger than a horse, so I have to be careful. What if your Heaven Chief Realm has a backup plan? It's not easy for me to cultivate to this level, and I don't want to die here without knowing why." The latter actually didn't show up, because he was afraid of the Heaven Chief Realm's backup plan. The little saint of the giant devil clan was just the vanguard. The giant demons are all idiots. They're easy to fool. After casually promising them some benefits, they'll rush forwards like idiots, but that's also good. I've forced out all of your cards. Now, there shouldn't be anyone that can stop me. He took a step forward. The little saint's figure shot out in a flash, crossing the Heaven Nether Bridge. On the Heaven Nether Bridge, the densely packed Nether Prison experts all raised their heads fervently. The low morale caused by the death of the giant demon erupted once again at this moment, becoming fiery. They waved their weapons and roared with excitement. Bufong stood at the edge of the deep pit, his vermilion robe fluttering in the wind. His face was slightly pale, which was the side effect of using the perishing pot. A great killing weapon like the perishing pot had to pay a certain price to be used. After all, this kind of weapon was not compatible with Bufong's cultivation. It never occurred to Bufong that the experts of the 9 Revolution Nether Chef's clan could be so insidious. With their hand behind their backs, the two little saint drifted over. In an instant, they crossed the Heaven Nether Bridge and stepped into the realm of the Heaven Chief Realm. TSK, with his hands clasped behind his back, The Heaven Chief Little Saint sensed the chaotic spiritual energy of heaven and earth and the thin immortal energy in the fifth floor of Heaven Chief realm. He couldn't help but click his tongue, a hint of disdain in his eyes. The glorious Heaven Chief realm of the past has indeed completely fallen. The Heaven Chief Little Saint said faintly. At its peak, the Heaven Chief realm had a divine chef and dozens of Chelan chefs to suppress the heavens. Even when facing the Nether prison, it was not afraid at all. But now, the Heaven Chief realm was in ruins. There were no divine chefs, only one Chelan chef, and even the little saint had barely broken through. The declining Heaven Chief realm could no longer cultivate more experts. It was a pity, but also a sadness. Despicable. The realm lord of the Dit realm came to his senses. He gritted his teeth in anger. With the help of the will of the Great Path, he had broken through to the little saint and could barely resist the little saint. With Bufong's perishing pot, he could even kill the little saint. However, the two little saints were still waiting to reap the benefits. This made the realm lord of the Dit realm feel powerless. Powerless and angry. The Zo lords trembled with anger. Were all the people of the Nether prison so despicable? They clearly had great strength, but they still used these despicable means. It was infuriating. The Heaven Chief Little Saint looked at the realm lord of the Dit realm and the Zo lords with a faint smile. Then his eyes turned and fell on Bufong. The Nether Chef Little Saint's eyes narrowed slightly at the sight of Bufong, who had unleashed his ultimate weapon. This guy was really a variable. The perishing pot was such a great weapon that even the giant devil, who was thick-skinned, couldn't resist it. If Bufong could still use it, they might really have to flee. In their opinion, perhaps only a 3-revolution little saint could resist the perishing pot. However, looking at Bufong's pale face, the Heaven Chief Little Saint smiled. How could there be no side effects when using such a great weapon with the strength of a 9-star true immortal? He must not even have the strength to lift a finger now. There was nothing to worry about. Hand over the seed of the Heaven Tree, and I can let the Heaven Chief realm live. If you don't cooperate, don't blame me for killing you. Crossing the Heaven Nether Bridge, the two Heaven Chief Little Saints landed on the shore. Their eyes swept around and fell on the body of the realm lord of the Dit realm. Suddenly, there was a loud explosion. The little saint appeared in front of the realm lord of the Dit realm. You want the seed of the Heaven Tree? Dream on. The realm lord of the Dit realm's face turned red as he growled unwillingly. The seed of the Heaven Tree was the hope of the Heaven Chief realm. How could he give it to a Nether Chef clan plunderer? You're courting death. The Heaven Chief Little Saint focused his eyes. He raised a hand. Then, he grabbed the realm lord of the Dit realm by the neck. With a rumble, he pressed the ladder to the ground. The Zo lords looked angry and pinched his fingers together. However, the Heaven Chief Little Saint waved his hand and sent him flying away in an instant. He coughed up blood and fell to the ground in the distance. The other Heaven Chief Little Saint flashed and appeared in front of Bufong as if he had teleported. Can you still use that kind of killing weapon? The Heaven Chief Little Saint looked straight at Bufong with an expressionless face. Bufong furrowed his brows. If you can't, just stay here quietly. We're very interested in your secrets. The corners of the little saint's mouth curved upward into a faint smile. The perishing pot was a delicacy, but it could produce such terrible destructive fluctuations. This made the little saint, a Chelan chef of the Nether Chef clan, very curious. So, the little saint decided to capture the little chef and study him after he got the seed of the Heaven Tree. If he could figure out how to make the perishing pot and how to make it, then the 9-revolution Nether Chef clan's position among the 9 clans in Nether Prison would skyrocket. Boom! In the distance, the terrible golden light descended once again. The realm lord of the Dit realm lord coughed up blood and roared. His golden hair fluttered in the wind, and his eyes were filled with endless anger. As the lord of a realm, the realm lord of the Dit realm was furious to be suppressed and humiliated like this. Boom! In a flash, the little saint of the Nether Chef clan was knocked flying away. The realm lord of the Dit realm was covered in golden armor once more, although it was already quite tattered. Are you crazy? You're burning your blood essence to gain the fighting strength of the little saint for a short time? The heaven chief little saint, who was knocked flying away by the realm lord of the Dit realm, said in horror, his pupils constricting. The realm lord of the Dit realm lord's eyes changed, and his skin turned crimson in an instant. Burning one's blood essence was a very extreme method, and it damaged one's origin. Boom! The realm lord of the Dit realm lord leaped up. The ground exploded as he charged toward the little saint. In just a flash, a fierce battle broke out between them. The battle between them was very fierce. They seemed to have turned into two black lines in midair, constantly colliding with each other. Every time they collided, they would cause a rumble and a clamor, while terrible blasts of air flew in all directions. Nether energy and immortal energy collided and corroded each other, producing sizzling sounds. Suddenly, a knife light that blotted out the sky emerged. The black knife light contained the vague will of the Great Path. It slashed down. A golden wok emerged in the realm lord of the Dit realm lord's hand. The wok hovered over his head and blocked the knife energy. In the distance, the little saint of the Nether Chef clan held a black kitchen knife in his hand, his face solemn. A deafening rumble rang out. The kitchen knife, hovering over the realm lord of the Dit realm lord's head, shattered in an instant. The realm lord of the Dit realm lord was smashed hard into the ground, as if all his bones were broken. What are you going to use to fight me? You've just become a little saint, and you can't even control the will of the Great Path. The heaven chief little saint sneered. The next moment, his body floated in midair. The sound of his heartbeat rang out. 1, 2, 3. 9 vague hearts emerged behind the little saint. A terrible aura kept spreading. Covered in blood, the realm lord of the Dit realm lord crawled out of the ruins, his eyes fixed on the little saint in midair. In the distance, the little saint standing at Bufong's side smiled faintly and said, "It's over." Bufong gave him a look. "No, not yet." Bufong answered expressionlessly. However, when the realm lord of the Dit realm lord saw that the little saint wanted to fight, even though he was covered in blood, he could not help but feel a little emotional. Perhaps this was the persistence of being the lord of a realm. "Oh, do you still have some trump cards?" The little saint asked, looking at Bufong in confusion. The corner of Bufong's mouth twitched. "Trump cards? Of course I do. There's still a dog who hasn't shown up yet." "Oh, a dog?" The heaven chief little saint was bewildered. A moment later, his eyes shrank. In the distance, when the little saint gathered the power of the 9 hearts of cooking path, he slashed with his knife. That sky-covering knife light seemed to want to cut the entire 5th floor of Heaven Chief Realm in half. The realm lord of the Dit realm stumbled, kneeling on the ground. He was powerless to resist. Despair seemed to be spreading. However, just as that knife was about to slash down, the void in front of the realm lord of the Dit realm suddenly twisted. It turned into a circular portal. Wind and snow blew out of the portal. A black, fat dog slowly walked out of the portal. Elegant cat-like steps, its fat jiggling. As soon as the dog appeared, it seemed to become the focus of the entire place, attracting everyone's eyes. "There's really a dog?" The heaven chief little saint, who was standing not far from Bufong, was bewildered. A moment later, he seemed to think of something. He sucked in a breath of cold air. "This dog? Even a dog wants to court death?" The heaven chief little saint said coldly. Facing a black dog that just walked out of the portal, he was naturally not afraid. The knife light slashed down, wanting to cut the black dog in half. The Lord Ghost stepped out of the void, glancing at the flustered realm lord of the Dit realm, twitching his doggy mouth. "You're really miserable." The Lord Ghost's magnetic voice resounded in the void. The realm lord of the Dit realm looked at the Lord Go, suddenly grinning. "Mangy dog, kill this thing for me." The realm lord of the Dit realm looked a little cold. In the void, the little saint's eyes focused, and the knife light slashed down. With a ripping sound, the void continued to collapse. The Lord Go turned his head, feeling the howling wind. The strong wind blew, causing the fur on the Lord Go's body to shiver. A moment later, the Lord Go's mouth twitched, reaching out a small, exquisite dog paw. Buzz, the nether energy in the sky gathered, turning into a dog paw that covered the sky. The dog's paw struck out and smashed onto the saber chi, shattering it completely. In the void, the little saint's eyes shrank, sucking in a breath of cold air. "Xiaopi, let's go," Bufang said softly. Xiaopi, who was lying on Bufang's shoulder, squeaked. Instantly, it turned into a jet of gold light, bringing Bufang to the realm lord of the Dit realm. The little saint was still in shock from the appearance of the Lord Go, so he did not stop Bufang. When he came back to his senses, Bufang had already reached the side of the realm lord of the Dit realm. The realm lord of the Dit realm looked at Bufang, panting heavily. The gold light on his body dispersed, and his aura became even weaker. He flipped his hand, taking out 2 dim heaven tree seeds, handing them to Bufang. His eyes were filled with hope. Bufang did not say anything, taking the seeds. With a thought, he took out a crystal fruit of life, letting the realm lord of the Dit realm eat it. As the crystal fruit of life entered his stomach, the body of the realm lord of the Dit realm, which felt empty, instantly became full. Life energy circulated, nourishing his body. Holding the 2 heaven tree seeds, Bufang glanced at the Lord Go. "You fat dog, why did you stay in the God-vanishing mountain for so long? The Lord Go has something to discuss with that crazy woman. What's the hurry? Aren't we already here?" The Lord Go grinned. In the next instant, he raised his exquisite dog paw, sending another paw at the heaven chief little saint in the air. "Then I'll leave this place to you. I'll be back soon," said Bufang. Then, with a thought, his entire being entered the heaven and earth farmland. Boom! Boom! As the Lord Go's paw came out, in the direction of the bronze gate, the majestic city wall of the nether prison suddenly shook. The Lord Go's paw seemed to have angered the supreme existence of the thick city wall. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.